a scarlet serpent seal on a cryptic letter, a derelict manor under a moonless sky, a chilling challenge to a duel of minds. Who dares to taunt Hercule Poirot, the world's greatest detective? What secrets lurk in the shadows of Blackthorn Manor? And why does this mysterious foe, the serpent, know every detail of Poirot's past? In a high-stakes game stretching from London's fog to Istanbul's bazaars, one question burns: can Poirot unravel the truth before the serpent strikes? Or will this be the case that breaks him? Dive into a tale of riddles, betrayal, and a villain unlike any other. Chapter 1. The Cryptic Invitation. The rain fell in a persistent drizzle over London, casting a silver sheen on the cobblestones outside Hercule Poirot's flat at Whitehaven Mansions. Inside, the air was warm, scented with the faint sweetness of hot chocolate, which Poirot sipped delicately from a porcelain cup. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, where rows of meticulously arranged books stood like silent sentinels. It was an evening for quiet reflection, the kind Poirot cherished after a case well solved. When the world seemed to pause in deference to his little gray cells, he sat at his polished mahogany desk, sorting through a small stack of correspondence with the precision of a watchmaker. Bill's invitations to society gatherings he had no intention of attending, and a letter from Captain Hastings. Now happily settled in the countryside, prattling on about his latest gardening misadventure, Poirot smiled faintly, setting the letter aside. It was then that his fingers brushed against an envelope unlike the others. It was heavy, made of thick, cream-colored vellum, sealed with a crimson wax stamp bearing the image of a coiled serpent, its eyes glinting with 2 tiny flecks of gold leaf. No return address, no postmark, only his name, written in an elegant, flowing script. Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Curiosity stirred within him, sharp and insistent. He turned the envelope over, noting its weight, the faint scent of jasmine clinging to it. With a silver letter opener, he broke the seal, revealing a single sheet of paper, folded with mathematical precision. The message was brief, yet it sent a thrill through his veins. Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you, a mind unrivaled in its clarity. I propose a challenge, a duel of wits, to test the limits of your famed intellect. Should you accept, come to Blackthorn Manor, near the village of Ashwick, at dusk on the 15th. Come alone. The game begins with a riddle, and the stakes are higher than you can imagine. Yours in anticipation, the serpent below the signature. A same scarlet serpent symbol gleamed, as if daring him to dismiss it. Poirot's mustache twitched, his green eyes narrowing. A duel of wits. The audacity was intoxicating. He leaned back in his chair, the firelight catching the glint of his patent leather shoes. Many had tried to outsmart him, swindlers, murderers, masterminds, but none had issued so bold an invitation. The serpent, whoever they were, knew precisely how to pique his interest. The 15th was tomorrow. He could decline, of course, return to his hot chocolate and orderly life. But the thought was as absurd as an unpolished shoe. Poirot was not a man too shy from a challenge, especially one wrapped in such exquisite mystery. He rose, smoothing his waistcoat, and paced the room, his mind already dissecting the letter. The choice of vellum suggested wealth or pretension. The jasmine scent hinted at sophistication, perhaps a woman, though he would not assume. The serpent symbol was no idle flourish. It spoke of cunning, danger, perhaps a nod to mythology or history. And Blackthorn Manor. He had heard of it, a crumbling estate in the wilds of Kent, abandoned since its last owner, a reclusive baron, vanished under murky circumstances a decade ago. The stage was set, and Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the hunt. The next morning, he prepared with his usual meticulous care. A tailored suit of charcoal gray, a silk tie in understated burgundy, and his ebony cane, its silver handle gleaming. He informed his valet, George, of a brief trip to the countryside, deflecting questions with a vague mention of a matter of intellectual curiosity. By noon, he was on a train to Ashwick, the Kentish landscape blurring past fields of emerald, hedgerows tangled with late summer blooms, and the occasional spire of a village church piercing the horizon. The train's rhythm was soothing, but Poirot's mind was far from restful. Who was the serpent? Criminal from his past, seeking revenge, a rival intellect, craving a test, or something entirely new? Ashwick was little more than a cluster of stone cottages, a pub, and a church, all nestled in a valley shadowed by ancient oaks. Poirot disembarked, drawing curious glances from villagers unused to such polished visitors. He hired a horse-drawn cart from the station, driven by a taciturn farmer named Mr. Grimsby, whose weathered face suggested he'd seen more of life than he cared to share. The road to Blackthorn Manor wound through dense woods, the air growing cooler as the trees closed in. Grimsby muttered about the manor's ill reputation, ghost stories, disappearances, the usual rural folklore, but Poirot listened with only half an ear, his attention fixed on the challenge ahead. The manor loomed into view as dusk painted the sky in hues of violet and gold. It was a Gothic relic, its turrets clawing at the heavens, ivy strangling its weathered stone. The windows were dark, save for one on the upper floor, where a single candle flickered, casting a ghostly glow. Poirot paid Grimsby, who seemed eager to leave, and approached the iron gates, which creaked open as if expecting him. The gravel path crunched under his shoes, leading to a massive oak door. Carved into its surface was a riddle, the letters, etched deep and precise. I am taken from a mine and shut up in a wooden case, from which I am never released, and yet I am used by almost every person. What am I? Poirot's lips curved into a smile. A classic riddle, elegant in its simplicity. He considered it for a moment, his mind sifting through possibilities. The answer was pencil lead graphite, to be precise, mined from the earth, encased in a wooden pencil, used by many yet never removed. He traced the letters with a gloved finger, finding a hidden panel that clicked open when he pressed the word lead carved subtly into the frame. Inside was a key, its bow shaped like a serpent's head. He turned it in the lock, and the door swung inward with a groan. The entrance hall was vast, its marble floor cracked, chandeliers draped in cobwebs. The air smelled of damp stone and old secrets. In the center stood a table, and on it a single candle burned beside another note, written in the same flowing script. Welcome, Monsieur Poirot. The game has begun. Your first task awaits in the dining room. Follow the serpent's trail and prove your worth. But beware, every step brings you closer to me, and I am watching. The note was unsigned, but the scarlet serpent seal gleamed at the bottom. Poirot folded it carefully, slipping it into his pocket. The dining room was to the left, its door ajar, revealing a long table set with dusty crystal and silver. At its head was a chair, and on it a velvet cushion bearing three objects: a tarnished pocket watch, a faded photograph of a woman in Edwardian dress, and a vial of dried herbs. Above them, pinned to the wall, was another note. These belong to a man you once knew, a man whose life ended because of you. Name him, and the path forward opens. Fail, and the game ends here. Poirot's heart quickened. A man whose life ended because of him. His career was littered with such possibilities, criminals he'd brought to justice, some who met the gallows, others who vanished into obscurity. T examined the objects with care. A D watch was engraved with the initials J.R. The photograph showed a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, her expression one of quiet defiance. The herbs were belladonna, deadly nightshade, a poisoner's tool. His mind raced crossword-prompting cases from years past. J.R. John Rutherford, a chemist convicted in 1919 for poisoning his business partner. The woman in the photograph was his sister, Clara, who had pleaded for his innocence but failed to sway the court. Poirot had unraveled Rutherford's alibi, sending him to the gallows. He spoke the name aloud. John Rutherford. A panel in the dining room wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated, his hand tightening on his cane. The serpent knew his history, his triumphs, perhaps his regrets. This was no ordinary foe. He lit a small lantern from the table, its flame casting long shadows, and stepped toward the staircase. The air grew colder as he descended, the walls closing in until he emerged into a stone chamber. At its center stood a pedestal, and on it a final note. "Well done, Monsieur Poirot. You have passed the first test. The serpent's trail leads to Ashwick Village. Seek the churchyard at midnight, where the next challenge awaits. But know this, I am no mere criminal. I am your shadow, your mirror, your equal. Until we meet, share AMU." The note was signed with the serpent symbol. It's crimson, wax still warm. Poirot's pulse thrummed with excitement, tempered by caution. The churchyard at midnight, a dramatic touch, but effective. He glanced at his watch. It was nearing 10. It's time enough to return to the village, perhaps find lodging at the pub, and prepare for the next move. As he ascended the stairs and stepped back into the night, the manor seemed to watch him, its windows like eyes in the dark. The village of Ashwick was quiet when he arrived, the pub's lights a warm beacon. Inside, the locals eyed him with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. He ordered a brandy, sipping it slowly as he listened to their hushed talk of Blackthorn Manor tales of ghostly figures, strange lights, and a curse that clung to the land. Poirot dismissed the superstitions, but noted their fear. The serpent had chosen their stage well, weaving myth and mystery to unsettle him. Yet Poirot was not a man to be unsettled. He retired to a small room above the pub, his mind alive with questions. Who was the serpent? A relative of Rutherford, seeking vengeance? A mastermind orchestrating a grander scheme? Or something more personal, a shadow from his own past?
Chapter 2. Whispers in the library fog pressed against the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor, curling like ghostly fingers over the frost-etched panes. Inside, the library was a cavern of shadows, its towering mahogany shelves groaning under the weight of centuries-old books. The air carried the scent of aged leather and wax, mingling with the faint metallic tang of ink. Miss Jane Marple, her shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders, moved with the quiet grace of a sparrow, her eyes sharp and searching. The scream from the previous night still echoed in her mind, a jagged sound that had torn through the manor's oppressive silence, leaving behind a residue of unease. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn's revelation in the foyer had set the house abuzz. The heart of Blackthorn, a sapphire the size of a wren's egg, was gone, stolen from its velvet-lined case in the drawing-room. The guests, a motley assembly of family, friends, and strangers, had stood in the flickering candlelight, their faces a gallery of shock, suspicion, and carefully veiled secrets. Miss Marple had noticed the butler, Mr. Grayson, his hands trembling as he poured brandy for the shaken party. She had also caught the diplomat, Claude Beaumont, standing a little too still, his smile a polished mask that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a tiny spark, that flicker of intuition, but Miss Marple knew better than to ignore it. In her experience, the smallest details a quiver, a glance. A misplaced word were the threads that unraveled the tightest knots of deceit. Now, in the library, she stood alone, her fingers tracing the spines of books that told the Blackthorn family's storied past. The room was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, with a massive oak table dominating the center, littered with papers, quills, and a single candelabrum casting a wavering glow. She had come here seeking quiet, a place to think, but the library seemed to hum with its own secrets. The scream had come from somewhere in the manor's east wing, near the drawing room, but no one had confessed to it. Eleanor had dismissed it as a servant's fright, but Miss Marple wasn't convinced. Screams, like secrets, had a way of revealing more than their owners intended. She paused by a shelf labeled Blackthorn Chronicles, a collection of leather-bound volumes detailing the family's lineage, triumphs, and scandals. Her fingers hesitated over a particularly worn tome. Its spine cracked and its title faded. As she pulled it free, a slip of paper fluttered to the floor, landing softly on the Persian rug. Miss Marple bent to retrieve it, her knees creaking faintly, and held it to the candlelight. The note was small, no larger than a calling card, written in a hurried, looping script. The sapphire hides where hearts betray. Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the thrill of discovery. The ink was fresh, its edges sharp and unyellowed, suggesting it had been written recently, perhaps that very night. The words were cryptic, a riddle wrapped in menace, but Miss Marple's mind was already turning, passing the phrase like a knitter unraveling a tangled skein. "Hearts betray," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Did it point to a lover's quarrel, a family feud, or something darker? And why hide such a note in a book few would think to open? She tucked the note into her sleeve, her movements deliberate, and returned the book to its place. The library was silent, but not empty. A faint rustle came from the far corner, where a velvet curtain hung over an alcove. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but she kept her expression serene, as if she were merely browsing. She moved toward the table, pretending to study a map of the estate, her ears straining for another sound. There it was again, a soft, deliberate shuffle, like someone shifting their weight. "Who's there?" she called, her voice gentle but firm, the tone of a schoolmistress addressing a wayward child. No answer came, but the curtain twitched, and Miss Marple caught the glint of a polished shoe peeking from its hem. She stepped closer, her slippers silent on the rug, and parted the curtain with a swift motion. Dr. Isolde Wren stood there, her thin frame rigid, her eyes wide with a mix of defiance and guilt. The botanist was an enigma, a woman of sharp intellect and sharper silences, invited to Blackthorn Manor for her expertise in rare plants. Her grey hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her hands clutched a small notebook, its pages bristling with pressed leaves. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice clipped, "I didn't expect anyone here at this hour." "Nor I," Miss Marple replied, her smile disarming. "But libraries have a way of drawing the curious, don't they? I was looking for a bit of history, and it seems I've stumbled into something more immediate." Dr. Wren's lips tightened, and she stepped into the candlelight, her notebook held close. "I was cataloguing my notes," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the shelves. "The Blackthorn greenhouse has specimens I've not seen elsewhere. I couldn't sleep. Not after everything." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes flicking to the notebook. "A scream in the night would unsettle anyone," she said. "And the theft of the sapphire such a loss. Have you any thoughts on who might have taken it?" Dr. Wren's gaze darted to the side, a fleeting betrayal of nerves. "I'm a scientist, not a detective," she said. "I deal in facts, not fancies. But if you must know, I heard Clara Blackthorn arguing with her aunt earlier. Something about a family debt. It sounded personal." Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression one of polite interest, though her mind was racing. Clara, the heiress, was a striking young woman with a temper as fiery as her auburn hair. An argument with Lady Eleanor could mean anything: resentment over inheritance, a clash of wills, or something tied to the sapphire. "A debt, you say?" Miss Marple prompted. "That's curious. Families often carry burdens that weigh heavier than gold." Dr. Wren hesitated, then nodded. "Clara said something about paying for sins not her own. I didn't hear more. I left them to it. But it was in the drawing room, just before the scream." Miss Marple's fingers brushed the note in her sleeve, the words "hearts betray" echoing in her thoughts. "Thank you, Dr. Wren," she said. "You've been most helpful. I think I'll take a turn around the room before retiring. The air here is so revealing." Dr. Wren gave a curt nod and slipped past, her footsteps quickening as she left the library. Miss Marple waited until the door clicked shut, then moved to the table, where a stack of stationery caught her eye. The top sheet bore a monogram, C.B. Claude Beaumont, the diplomat. She lifted it, holding it to the light. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, with a faint watermark of a crest. More importantly, the ink on the note matched the hue of a half-empty bottle beside the stationery, its cap loose as if recently used. Her pulse quickened. The note's handwriting was distinctive, with a flourish on the Y that matched the monogram's elegant curve. Claude Beaumont, with his polished manners and guarded eyes, had written the cryptic message, or so it seemed. But why? Was he the thief, taunting the household with riddles? Or was he warning someone, perhaps entangled in the same web of deceit? Miss Marple sat in a high-backed chair, the candlelight casting her shadow long and thin across the table. She drew a small notebook from her reticule and began to sketch a list of names: Eleanor, Clara, Claude, Dr. Wren, Mr. Grayson. Each was a piece in the puzzle, but the picture was far from clear. The note suggested betrayal, but whose? The sapphire's theft was no petty crime. It carried the weight of history, of family secrets buried deep. She thought of Clara's argument. The family debt Dr. Wren had overheard. Blackthorn Manor was steeped in whispers of old scandals, a disinherited son, a gambling uncle, a dual fought over honor. Could the sapphire be tied to one of these? And what of the scream? It had been raw, primal, not the sound of a startled servant, but of someone facing terror or discovery. The library's clock struck one, its chime low and mournful. Miss Marple rose, her mind alight with possibilities. The note was a clue, but not the only one. The manor was alive with secrets, and she would need to tread carefully to uncover them. She slipped the monogrammed paper into her notebook, a quiet triumph settling in her chest. The spark of intuition had caught, and though the flame was small, it was enough to light her way. As she left the library, the fog outside seemed to thicken, pressing against the manor like a living thing. Miss Marple paused in the corridor, her hand on the doorframe. Somewhere in this house, a thief or worse lurked, their heart betrayed by their own actions, and she, with her sharp eyes and sharper mind, was already closing in.
Chapter 3. Shadows in the Village. Hercule Poirot stepped off the creaking cart that had carried him from Blackthorn Manor, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp cobblestones of Blackthorn Village. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and chimney smoke. In the sky hung low a bruised canvas of gray, threatening another downpour. The village, nestled in a hollow of the English countryside, seemed to huddle against the wind, its thatched cottages and ivy-clad walls exuding a quiet unease. Poirot adjusted his overcoat, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. A baker sweeping his stoop, a child darting behind a barrel, an old woman peering from a window before snapping the curtain shut. Something was amiss here, and his little gray cells were already stirring. The note from the serpent, found in the manor's shadowy hall, had directed him here with a single line. The village holds my secrets, Poirot. Find them before they find you. The challenge was clear, but the intent was shrouded. It's the serpent watching him, even now, lurking behind one of these quaint facades. Poirot's mustache twitched as he considered the audacity of his foe. This was no ordinary criminal. This was a mind that delighted in games, in weaving webs of deception. He would need to tread carefully, for Blackthorn was not merely a backdrop, was a board, and he was a piece in play. His first stop was the village inn. The crooked bow, its sign swaying in the wind with a groan that seemed almost human. The interior was dim, lit by flickering oil lamps that cast long shadows across the worn wooden floor. A handful of patrons farmers in muddy boots. A traveling merchant with a weathered satchel glanced up as Poirot entered, eyes lingering a moment too long before returning to their pints. The innkeeper, a stout man with a face like a crumpled map, wiped his hands on a rag and approached. "Good day, sir," the innkeeper said, his tone polite but guarded. "What brings a gentleman like you to Blackthorn?" "Not much here for city folk." Poirot smiled, his eyes warm but calculating. "A matter of curiosity, monsieur. I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek information. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual in your village of late?" The innkeeper's brow furrowed, and he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Unusual, you say? Aye, there's been queer goings-on. Things go missing: candles from the church, a mirror from Widow Grayson's shop, a book from the vicar's study. Small things, mind, but it's got folks on edge. Say, it's the ghost of Blackthorn Manor, stirred up again." "Ghosts, you say?" Poirot's tone was light, but his mind was already dissecting the information. "And what do the good people of Blackthorn believe about this manor?" The innkeeper hesitated, glancing at the patrons, who had fallen silent. "They say it's cursed, sir. Ever since the old lord vanished 30 years back, some reckon. He never left, that his spirit haunts the place. Others—" He trailed off, wiping the counter nervously. "Others," Poirot prompted, his voice gentle but insistent. "Others say it's no ghost, but someone living, a shadow, moving at night, seen in the churchyard, mostly, cloaked and quick. Nobody gets close enough to know for sure." Poirot nodded, filing away the details. "And where might I find someone who has seen this shadow?" The innkeeper pointed toward the door. "Try old Meg, the flower seller by the market cross. She's got eyes like a hawk and a tongue that don't stop. Okay, if anyone's seen something, it's her." Thanking the man, Poirot stepped back into the drizzle, his umbrella a shield against the elements. The market cross stood at the village's heart, a weathered stone pillar surrounded by stalls selling apples, bread, and wool. Old Meg was unmistakably wiry woman with a face like a dried apple, her cart bursting with late-blooming roses and lavender. She eyed Poirot suspiciously as he approached, her gnarled hands clutching a bouquet. "You're that detective fellow, ain't you?" she said, before he could speak. Hercule was poking around the manor. "What's your business here?" Poirot bowed slightly, his charm undimmed by her brusqueness. "Mademoiselle Meg, I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek only the truth. I am told you have seen a figure, a shadow, in the churchyard. Might you share what you know?" Meg snorted, but her eyes gleamed with the thrill of gossip. "Seen it? Aye. 3 nights past, near midnight. Cloaked, it was moving like a cat among the graves. It's too quick to be a ghost, if you ask me. Dropped something. The scrap of paper, caught in the hedge. I didn't touch it. Mind, didn't want no part of that trouble." Poirot's pulse quickened, though his expression remained serene. "And where, pray, is this churchyard?" She pointed down a muddy lane, past the baker's, by the old yew tree. "Okay, you'll see the hedge, near the paupers' graves. But mind yourself, detective. That shadow ain't friendly." With a nod, Poirot set off, his mind racing. The theft scandals, a mirror, a book seemed trivial, yet their selection felt deliberate. The serpent was leaving breadcrumbs, and the churchyard held the next piece. The lane wound past shuttered cottages, the air growing colder as the church came into view. Its spire pierced the gray sky, and the yew tree loomed like a sentinel over the graves. Poirot approached the hedge, his eyes scanning the tangled branches. There, caught in the thorns, was a crumpled scrap of paper. He plucked it carefully, unfolding it to reveal a series of letters. CMBS. A code, he thought, his fingers tracing the letters. But what did it mean? Standing among the graves, he let his mind work, the pieces shifting like a puzzle. The theft scandal's mirror book matched the first letters of the code. 2 more items, then, starting with S. He recalled the innkeeper's tales. No mention of anything stolen beginning with S. Yet, the pattern was clear. The serpent was spelling something, a message hidden in plain sight. He returned to the village square, seeking more clues. At the baker shop, a young girl was sweeping the stoop, her eyes darting nervously. Poirot approached, his demeanor disarming. "Bonjour, mademoiselle. I am told things have been stolen in Blackthorn. Have you? Lost anything yourself?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. "My scarf, sir. Blue silk, gone from the washing line 2 nights ago. Thought it was the wind, but it's queer, ain't it?" Poirot's eyes lit up. "Scarfess, 1 piece of the code. And anything else, perhaps, beginning with S." She frowned, thinking. "The blacksmith lost a shovel, I heard. Took it right from his forge. They say, shovel-less." The code was complete. CMBS. Poirot thanked the girl and stepped away, his mind racing. The letters could be initials, a word, or something more obscure. He needed context, a connection to the serpent. The churchyard called him back, its secrets not yet fully uncovered. As dusk fell, Poirot returned to the graves, the air thick with mist. The paupers section was overgrown, the headstones cracked and moss-covered. He moved carefully, his eyes catching a glint of metal beneath a bush. Kneeling, he retrieved a small tin box, its lid engraved with the serpent. Inside were documents, newspaper clippings, case notes, photographs all tied to his past investigations. One clipping stood out, a 1912 case. The arrest of a crime syndicate led by a woman named Marianne Duval. Poirot's heart skipped. Marianne, brilliant and ruthless, had sworn revenge when he'd sent her to prison. Could she be the serpent? The documents were annotated in red ink, detailing his methods, his deductions, even his habits. Whoever the serpent was, they had studied him intimately, their grudge personal and deep. A final note in the box read, "The game moves forward. Poirot, seek the Iron Horse at midnight." The Iron Horse, the midnight train to London. Poirot checked his watch. He had 3 hours. The village was quiet now, its secrets heavier than the mist. As he made his way to the station, a figure watched from the shadows, their cloak blending with the night. Poirot felt the gaze, but saw nothing. The serpent was close, their game tightening like a noose. At the station, a single lantern swayed. In the wind, Poirot boarded the train, the whistle shrieking as it pulled away. The village of Blackthorn faded into the darkness, but its shadows clung to him. The code, the thefts, the documents all pointed to a mind that knew him too well. Marianne Duval's name echoed in his thoughts, but he needed proof. The train rattled on, carrying him toward the next move in this deadly duel, his little gray cells burning with purpose. Chapter 4. The midnight train. The platform at Blackthorn Station was a study in desolation. Its single lamp, casting a feeble glow against a fog that curled like a living thing. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned to the chin, stood beneath the flickering light, his valise at his feet. Tentacle. The cryptic documents unearthed in the churchyard had yielded a single, tantalizing clue, a crumpled ticket stub for the midnight train to London. Tucked between pages of his own case notes, annotated, in a hand that mocked his precision. The serpent's challenge was clear board the train. Find the next piece of the puzzle. As the distant whistle of the locomotive pierced the night, Poirot's mustache twitched. Squana, his gray cells already humming with anticipation. The train, a gleaming beast of steam and steel, screeched to a halt, its carriages exhaling clouds of vapor into the chill air. Poirot stepped aboard, his polished shoes clicking on the platform, and entered a world of polished wood and velvet curtains. The first-class carriage was sparsely populated, its occupants a gallery of eccentricities. A retired colonel with a walrus mustache barking orders at a porter. A silent priest, his eyes fixed on a worn breviary. A young woman in a cloche hat, her fingers nervously twisting a locked diary. And a lanky man in a tweed suit, sketching furiously in a notebook. The air was thick with the scent of cigar smoke, and intrigue, and Poirot, settling into a plush seat, felt the weight of the serpent's game settle over him as the train lurched forward. The conductor, a wiry man with a pinched face, punched Poirot's ticket with mechanical precision. "London, sir. A restless night for travel," he remarked, his eyes darting to the shadows beyond the window. "Restless, perhaps," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as silk, "but the night, it reveals much to those who observe." The conductor nodded, moving on, and Poirot's gaze swept the carriage. The serpent's note from the manor had promised a passenger held the next clue. But who? The colonel's bluster seemed too loud, too theatrical. The priest's silence too deliberate. The woman's diary, locked with a brass clasp, piqued his interest, as did the sketches frenetic energy. Each was a piece in the serpent's puzzle, and Poirot's task was to fit them together. He began with the colonel, who introduced himself as Reginald Hawthorne, late of the Indian Army. "Damned inconvenient. This late train," he grumbled, pouring whiskey from a silver flask. "Only took it because my club's closed for renovations." "You a detective, you say?" "Humph. Had a run-in with your sort in Calcutta, '98. Nasty business. Stolen rubies." Poirot's smile was polite, his eyes sharp. "Rubies, you say? A crime of passion or calculation. Hawthorne snorted. Thieves, the lot of them, never caught the blighter. His story was vivid but vague, and Poirot noted the absence of specifics. The colonel was a distraction, perhaps, but not the key. Next, Poirot approached the priest, Father Anselm, whose gaunt face barely lifted from his book. "Pardon, mon père," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "but the journey is long, and conversation, it lightens the spirit." The priest's eyes, pale as winter, met his. "I seek only solitude, monsieur. My prayers are my company." His fingers tightened on the breviary, and Poirot glimpsed a faint tremor. Fear or guilt? The priest's reticence was a wall, but Poirot filed it away, sensing a crack beneath the surface. The young woman, Miss Clara Beaumont, was less guarded. Her hands fidgeted with the diary, its lock glinting under the carriage's gaslight. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft but unsteady, "I've read of you. You solved the case of the blue sapphire, didn't you, mademoiselle?" Poirot replied, his tone warm, disarming. "A small matter of observation. And you? What brings you to this train?" Her eyes darted to the diary. "I'm visiting family in London. My aunt is ill." The lie was subtle, but Poirot caught the hesitation, the way her fingers brushed the lock as if it were a talisman. I leaned closer, his voice conspiratorial. "That diary, it holds memories, Nan, or perhaps secrets." Clara flushed, clutching it tighter. "It's private," she snapped, but her defiance wavered. Poirot retreated, his smile apologetic, planting a seed of trust. The diary was the key, he was certain, but he needed her to open it willingly. The sketcher, a wiry man named Julian Carver, was last. His pencil danced across the page, sketching passengers with uncanny accuracy. "You're that detective, aren't you?" he said, without looking up. "I draw what I see. People's faces tell stories." Poirot peered at the sketchbook, noting a caricature of himself, mustache exaggerated. "And what story does my face tell, monsieur?" Carver grinned. "Cunning. Curiosity. A man who misses nothing." His tone was playful, but his eyes flickered to Clara's diary, then away. A slip, but enough. Carver was watching, perhaps for the serpent, as the train rattled through the night. Kiro's mind worked like a finely tuned machine. The serpent's challenge required identifying the passenger with a clue. But the clues were layered behavior, objects, lies. He decided to test the waters, orchestrating a small drama. Rising, he announced loudly, "Mes amis, I fear a thief is among us. My watch, it is missing." Key patted his pocket, his expression one of theatrical distress. The reaction was immediate. Hawthorne blustered, checking his own pockets. Anselm's lips moved in silent prayer. Carver's pencil paused, his eyes narrowing. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her diary, as if to protect it. Poirot watched, noting her panic. The watch, of course, was safely in his waistcoat, but the ruse had worked. Clara was the fulcrum of this puzzle. Approaching her again, Poirot softened his tone. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, forgive my earlier intrusion, but I sense you carry a burden. If I may assist, as one who has seen many secrets." Clara's eyes welled with tears. "It's not mine," she whispered, glancing at the diary. "A man gave it to me at the station. He said to guard it, that someone would ask for it in London. I didn't know." Poirot's heart quickened. "This man, describe him. Tall, masked, with a voice like silk. He frightened me." Her words confirmed it, the serpent himself. Poirot's mind raced. The diary was the clue, but its lock was a barrier. He needed her trust, and quickly. "May I see it, mademoiselle? I swear, on my honor, to protect you." After a moment's hesitation, Clara nodded, her fingers trembling as she handed him the diary. The lock was a simple combination, 4 digits. Poirot's mind flashed to the manor's riddle: 4 legs, 2, none. A hunch guided his fingers. For 200, the lock clicked open, and Clara gasped. Inside was a map, hand-drawn, depicting a coastal cove in Cornwall, marked with a serpent's symbol. A note in the same elegant script read, "Seek the den where shadows trade, Monsieur Poirot. The game continues." The map was precise, pointing to a smuggler's den, a place Poirot knew from a case years ago. The serpent was weaving his past into the present. Taunt as much as a challenge, before Poirot could question Clara further. The train lurched violently, plunging into darkness as the lights failed. Shouts filled the carriage, and Poirot's hand tightened on the diary. Its figure brushed past him, swift and silent, and he heard a faint click, the sound of a door. When the lights flickered back, Carver was gone, his sketchbook abandoned on the seat. Poirot flipped through it, finding a drawing of the coastal cove, identical to the map. Carver was no mere artist, he was the serpent's eyes. The train slowed, approaching London. Poirot returned the diary to Clara, advising her to stay with her aunt and speak to no one. "You are safe now, mademoiselle," he said, though he knew the serpent's reach was long. As he stepped onto the platform, the sea air of Cornwall already seemed to beckon, sharp and briny in his imagination. The map, tucked in his pocket, was a lifeline to the next challenge, but Carver's disappearance gnawed at him. Was he an accomplice, or another pawn? In the station's bustle, Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. A man in a tweed coat lingered near a newsstand, sketching. Carver, Poirot approached, but the man vanished into the throng, leaving only a dropped pencil. On it, etched faintly, was a serpent's symbol. The game was far from over, and Poirot's resolve hardened. The serpent was clever, but Hercule Poirot was cleverer. With the map as his guide, he hailed a cab, bound for the coast, where the next move awaited in the shadows of a smuggler's den. The night was young, and Poirot's little gray cells burned bright, ready to unravel the serpent's web, one thread at a time. Chapter 5. The smugglers off the Dorset coast stretched before Hercule Poirot like a jagged scar on the earth, its cliffs battered by the relentless churn of the sea. The wind carried a briny tang, sharp and invigorating, as he adjusted the brim of his borrowed cap, a rough woolen thing ill-suited to his usual sartorial elegance. Disguised as a wealthy antiquities buyer, he descended a narrow path toward the smuggler's den, a cave system rumored to house treasures pilfered from forgotten corners of the world. The clue from the midnight trainer map, etched in a nervous woman's diary, had led him here, to this windswept edge of England, where the serpent's game grew ever more perilous. Poirot's polished shoes, now scuffed from the rocky terrain, crunched against a shingle beach. The cave's mouth loomed ahead, a dark maw framed by jagged rocks, its entrance guarded by 2 burly men whose eyes glinted with suspicion. One, with a scar snaking across his cheek, leaned against a crate, a cigarette dangling from his lips. The other, broader and with fists like hams, patted down a sailor unloading barrels from a skiff. Poirot straightened, adopting the haughty air of his alias, Monsieur Etienne Dubois, a Frenchman with a penchant for rare artifacts and a purse heavy with gold. "Bonsoir, Messieurs," Poirot said, his accent thickened deliberately, a touch of Parisian flair. "I am expected, oui, Monsieur Dubois, for the special consignment." The scarred man squinted, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Ain't heard of no Dubois. Who sent you?" Poe's lips curled into a confident smile, though his heart ticked like a metronome. "Mutual friend, perhaps, one who favors serpentine signatures." He tapped his walking stick lightly, as if bored. But his eyes scanned the man's reaction. The guard's brow furrowed, then smoothed, right down the path. "Don't wonder." He jerked his thumb toward the cave, and Poirot nodded, stepping into the damp, echoing darkness. Inside, the air was thick with salt and mildew, the walls glistening under the flicker of oil lamps. Crates were stacked haphazardly, some pried open to reveal glints of gold and ivory. Smugglers moved with practiced efficiency, their voices low, their glances wary. Poirot's gaze darted to the shadows, searching for signs of the serpent or their next challenge. The map had promised a shipment tied to a case he'd solved a decade ago, the theft of the amethyst diadem, a relic stolen from a Viennese baroness. Could the serpent have unearthed it? Wiry man with a pockmarked face approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Dubois, I'm Cutter. You here for the goods?" "Precisement," Poirot replied, his tone crisp. "I seek items of singular provenance. Perhaps you have something from Vienna, Nan." Cutter's eyes narrowed, but he gestured toward a curtained alcove. "This way. Got something special, but it ain't cheap." Behind the curtain, a table displayed artifacts, a jade idol, tarnished chalice, and there, gleaming under a lamp, the amethyst diadem, its purple stones winking like stars. Poirot's breath caught. The case had haunted him his first major triumph, exposing a ring of aristocratic thieves. The serpent's choice was no coincidence. They were weaving his past into their game. "Magnifique," Poirot murmured, feigning. "Ah, but I must verify its authenticity. May I?" He reached for the diadem, but Cutter's hand shot out, gripping his wrist. "Careful, Frenchie. We don't trust easy here." Poirot met his gaze, unflinching. "Nor do I, monsieur, but trust is earned, Nan. Let us discuss terms." As Cutter haggled, Poirot's mind raced. The serpent's challenge was near. He could feel it, like a tightening noose. A faint hum interrupted his thoughts, coming from a crate in the corner. He excused himself, claiming a need to inspect another item, and approached the crate. A gramophone sat atop it, its needle poised. He turned the crank, and the serpent's voice slithered out, low and mocking. "Monsieur Poirot, you've found my treasure. But treasures hide traitors. Among these men, one betrays his own. Name him, or the game ends here. You have 1 hour." The needle scratched to a stop. Poirot's eyes swept the cave. Smugglers bustled, unaware of the game within their midst. A traitor among them, how fitting for the serpent to twist loyalty into a puzzle. He adjusted his cap, his mind sharpening like a blade. He began with observation, his little gray cells humming. The smugglers numbered 12, a motley crew of sailors, ex-soldiers, and rogues. Cutter, the leader, barked orders with authority. But his glances darted nervously to a lanky man with a limp, unloading crates with exaggerated care. Another, a red-bearded giant, whispered to a young lad, their eyes flicking toward Cutter. A third, a gaunt fellow with ink-stained fingers, scribbled in a ledger, his hands trembling slightly. Suspicion hung in the air like damp. Poirot mingled, posing as the fastidious buyer, asking pointed questions. "This chalice," he said to the red-bearded man, "it is Byzantine. Worth a fortune to the right collector." The man grunted, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "Ask Cutter." "I just moved the stuff. And you, monsieur?" Poirot turned to the limping man, who was prying open a crate. "You handled these treasures with such care. A man of experience, perhaps?" The man flinched, his hammer slipping. Just doing my job," he muttered, limping away. Poirot's suspicions grew. The limping man, called Sparrow by the others, moved with purpose, but his eyes betrayed fear. Was he the traitor, or merely nervous under scrutiny? Poirot needed more. He approached the gaunt ledger-keeper, whose name was Finch. "Your records, they are meticulous, Nan. A man of detail must see much. Finch's pen paused. "I see what's paid for," he said, voice tight. "You want details? Talk to Cutter." Poirot smiled thinly. "Of course, but details, they reveal truths, do they not?" Finch's hand shook, ink blotting the page. A clue, perhaps. Poirot drifted back to the diadem, pretending to inspect it while eavesdropping. Sparrow whispered to the young lad, their words inaudible but urgent. The red-bearded man, meanwhile, slipped a small object into his Paquita vial, glinting briefly in the lamplight. Time ticked on. Poirot needed to test his suspects. He approached Cutter again, dropping a calculated hint. "This diadem, it reminds me of a case in Vienna. A betrayal led to its theft. You know, trust is so fragile, Nan." Cutter's jaw tightened. "No betrayals here. My men are loyal, right, eh?" Poirot said lightly, watching Sparrow flinch across the cave. "Loyalty is a mask some wear poorly." He staged a distraction, knocking over a crate of pottery. Shards. As the smugglers scrambled, Poirot slipped toward Finch's ledger, flipping it open. The entries were precise, but one caught his eye. A shipment marked SS Scarlet Serpent, with a delivery to Paris, not listed among the others. Finch was hiding something. Poirot then shadowed Sparrow, noting his limp seemed inconsistent, exaggerated when watched, faint, perhaps. He confronted the young lad, who stammered under Poirot's gaze. "You speak with Sparrow often." "We?" "He trusts you." The lad paled. He just tells me what to move. Says to keep quiet." "Quiet about what?" Poirot pressed, his voice soft but firm. The lad bolted, confirming Poirot's hunch. Sparrow was the key. He followed, catching Sparrow near the cave's mouth, where he was slipping a note to a sailor from the skiff. Poirot seized the no-decoded message, its symbols matching those from Blackthorn Village. "Sparrow, is it?" Poirot said, stepping into his path. "Or, should I say, the traitor. You worked for the Serpent, Nan." Sparrow's eyes widened, his limp forgotten as he lunged. Poirot sidestepped, tripping him with his cane. The smugglers turned, chaos erupting. Cutter roared, drawing a pistol, but Poirot raised a hand. "Messieurs, this man betrays you. His note proves it. He sells your secrets to another." The note, now in Cutter's hands, confirmed Poirot's claim. Sparrow confessed, trembling, that the Serpent had blackmailed him, promising freedom for his brother, imprisoned abroad. The next challenge, he gasped, awaited in Paris, an auction of stolen art. As the smugglers bound Sparrow, Poirot slipped away, the diadem's glint fading behind him. The sea roared as he climbed the cliff path, a ticket to Paris in his pocket, his mind alight with the Serpent's audacity. The game was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Chapter 6. The Parisian puzzled the train to Paris rattled through the French countryside, its rhythm a counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's restless thoughts. The Dorset cliffs, with their salty tang and smuggler's secrets, were behind him now, but the Serpent's taunting riddle still echoed in his mind. "Among us walks a traitor. His heart beats false. Name him." The words nodded him, not for their complexity, but for their implication. The Serpent's game was no mere intellectual exercise. It was personal, a labyrinth of motives and masks designed to unsettle him. As the train's whistle pierced the dawn, Poirot adjusted his tie, his gray cells already sifting through the threads of this latest challenge. Paris greeted him with a drizzle that blurred the city's edges, softening the sharp spires of Notre Dame and the bustling avenues into a watercolor haze. He checked into a modest hotel near the Place Pigalle, its faded elegance a fitting backdrop for his covert mission. The clue from Dorset map to a clandestine auction in Montmartre lay folded in his pocket, its creases worn from scrutiny. The Serpent's challenge was clear: spot a forged painting among masterpieces. But Poirot suspected the auction was a stage, the painting a prop in a larger drama. The serpent was not merely testing his eye for art, but his ability to see through deception itself. The pulse of Montmartre dusk was a kaleidoscope of contradictions, sketching under gaslights, cabaret singers spilling melodies into smoky air, and pickpockets weaving through crowds with practiced ease. Poirot, dressed in a nondescript gray suit to blend with the bohemian throng, navigated the cobbled streets toward La Maison de l'Art, a discreet gallery tucked behind a boulangerie. Acaza's location was no accident. Its obscurity screamed secrecy. It's the kind that cloaked illicit dealings in velvet whispers at the gallery's door. A burly man with a scar snaking down his cheek demanded a password. Poirot, recalling a phrase scrawled on the Dorset map, lumber, du serpent, uttered it with quiet confidence. The guard nodded, ushering him into a dimly lit foyer where the air smelled of wax and old money. Inside, the auction room buzzed with a motley crowd, aristocrats in tailored coats, shifty-eyed dealers, and a woman in emerald silk whose nervous glances betrayed her as more than a casual bidder. Poirot's eyes lingered on her, noting the way her fingers clutched a fan, its ivory handle worn from use. The auctioneer, a wiry man with a monocle, stood at a podium, his voice cutting through the chatter. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we offer treasures, rarely seen works of genius, some whispered to be liberated from their origins. A ripple of laughter followed, but Poirot's focus sharpened. The serpent's game was unfolding, and he was not here to bid, but to observe. The canvas of deception. The first lot was a Diga, ballerinas frozen in mid-whirl, their pastel skirts luminous under the chandelier's glow. Next came a Cezanne, its apples and pears rendered with geometric defiance. Poirot studied each painting, his eyes tracing brushstrokes and signatures, searching for the telltale flaw the serpent had dared him to find. A Renoir caught his attention on riverside scene, figures lounging under dappled sunlight. The colors were vibrant, the composition flawless, yet something nagged at him. The brushstrokes in the foliage lacked Renoir's characteristic fluidity, their edges too precise, almost mechanical. He leaned closer, feigning interest to deflect attention. The woman in emerald silk was bidding fiercely now, her fan snapping shut as she raised her paddle. Poirot noted her intensity, the way her eyes flicked to a man in a corner, heavy-set figure with a waxed mustache, scribbling in a notebook. A dealer, perhaps, or something more sinister. The Renoir sold for a staggering sum, and as it was carried off, Poirot caught a glimpse of its frame, a faint scratch, deliberate, forming a tiny serpent's head. His pulse quickened. The painting was the key, but not in the way the serpent intended. As the auction progressed, Poirot slipped to the side, where a waiter balanced a tray of champagne. Monsieur Poirot murmured, his accent softened to charm. The Renoir, where is it taken after the sale? The waiter, a young man with nervous eyes, hesitated. Poirot pressed a franc into his palm, and the boy whispered to the back room for inspection. Poirot nodded, his plan forming. He needed to see that painting again, but not under the auctioneer's watchful gaze. A game within a game. The back room was a cramped space cluttered with crates and canvases, its air thick with turpentine. Poirot slipped inside during a lull. The auction's hum muffled through the walls. The Renoir rested on an easel, its frame glinting under a single bulb. He examined it closely, confirming his suspicion. The brushstrokes were a skilled imitation, the signature too crisp, but the frame held the true prize, a thin compartment along its edge, revealed by the serpent scratch. Inside was a folded note, its script unmistakably the serpent's. Well done, Monsieur Poirot. The Chateau de Valmont awaits. Seek the mirrored room where truth bends. Before he could pocket the note, footsteps echoed. Poirot slid behind a crate as the woman in emerald silk entered, her fan now tucked into a velvet purse. She spoke in hushed tones to the heavy-set man from the auction, their words a rapid mix of French and coded phrases. "The Belgian is here," she hissed. "He's too close." The man grunted. Viper said to let him play for now. Poirot's breath caught. Viper, Monsieur Viper, was the serpent, or perhaps a lieutenant. The game was layered, a chessboard, where he was both player and pawn. As the pair left, Poirot emerged, the note tucked into his waistcoat. He returned to the auction just as the gendarmes burst in, their shouts shattering the room's decorum. "Police, nobody move." The woman in emerald silk froze, her purse slipping to the floor. Bidders scrambled, paintings toppled, and chaos erupted. Poirot, ever composed, slipped through a side door, the note burning against his chest. The serpent had anticipated the raid, orchestrating it to test his agility. He would not disappoint. The streets of secrets outside, Montmartre streets, pulsed with nightlife, but Poirot's focus was singular. The Chateau de Valmont, in the Loire Valley, was his next destination, but Paris held more clues. The woman in emerald silk, her face, her voice nagged at his memory. He recalled a case from years ago, a stolen necklace in Nice, where a similar woman had played the distraught heiress. Could she be Marianne Duval, the mastermind he'd imprisoned, now free and vengeful? The thought tightened his jaw, but he needed evidence, not speculation. He hailed a taxi to the Café des Artistes, a haunt for Paris's underbelly. There, over a glass of absinthe he barely touched, Poirot eavesdropped on a table of art dealers. Their talk of Viper's network confirmed his suspicions. The serpent was not a lone figure, but the head of a syndicate, using art as a front for something larger, perhaps blackmail, perhaps espionage. A name surfaced: Claude Renard, a forger with a penchant for Renoirs. Poirot filed it away, his mind mapping connections. At midnight, he visited a contact, Madame Leclerc, a retired opera singer turned informant. Her Montparnasse apartment was a shrine to faded glamour, its walls draped with velvet and memories. "Hercule," she purred, her voice smoky, "you chase shadows again?" He showed her the note, and her eyes narrowed. "Valmont is no mere chateau. It's a maze, built by a mad nobleman. Be careful, the mirrors lie." She handed him a dossier on Renard, confirming his role in Viper's network. Poirot thanked her, his mind already on the train to the Loire, the train to Valmont. Journey to the Loire Valley was a blur of vineyards and mist. Poirot sat alone in his compartment, the note from the Renoir frame open before him. The serpent's words, where truth bends, suggested more than a physical mirror. This was a psychological game, designed to make him doubt his instincts, his allies, perhaps even himself. He thought of Hastings, far away in London, and the faint unease from Dorset's riddle about a traitor. Could the serpent know something about his friend? No, he dismissed the thought. Hastings was loyal, if occasionally bumbling tours. He hired a car to Valmont, the chateau's silhouette rising against a stormy sky. Its turrets loomed like sentinels, guarding secrets older than the serpent's game. Poirot's driver, a laconic farmer, muttered about local legends, ghosts, betrayals. A nobleman who built a room of mirrors to trap his enemies. Poirot listened, his mind sifting fact from folklore. The serpent had chosen Valmont for a reason, and he would uncover it. The mirrored room, the chateau's gates were unlocked, as if expecting him. Inside, dust hung in the air, and the silence was oppressive. Poirot followed the note's instructions to the mirrored room, hexagonal chamber where every wall reflected his image, distorted and multiplied. Photographs, letters, and a broken watch lay scattered on the table, each item a clue to the serpent's identity. He examined a letter, its script elegant but furious, accusing him of ruining a life. The signature lease, Moreau stirred a memory, a fraud case, a woman whose charm hid a ruthless streak. Could she be the serpent, or another pawn? A gramophone crackled to life, the serpent's voice filling the room. You see yourself, Poirot, but do you see the truth? A friend betrays you. The voice hinted at Hastings, sowing doubt. Poirot's heart tightened, but his logic held firm. He gathered the clues, noting a photograph of a young woman resembling the emerald silk bidder. The broken watch, stuck at 3:15, matched the time of a bank heist he'd foiled years ago. Chapter 7. The chateau's secret. The train to the Loire Valley sliced through the French countryside. Its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's racing thoughts. The carriage was a cocoon of polished wood and velvet, but Poirot's mind was far from its comforts. The serpent's game had escalated, each clue a barbed hook pulling him deeper into a labyrinth of deception. The latest note, slipped into his pocket during the chaos of the Parisian auction, had directed him to the Chateau de Valmont, a Renaissance relic nestled in the heart of the Loire. Its mirrored room, the note promised, held the key to the next stage of their duel. Poirot's mustache twitched as he considered the implications. A mirrored room suggested distortion, illusion qualities. The serpent wielded like a maestro. He adjusted his perfectly knotted tie, his reflection in the train. Window sharp despite the dawn's soft light. The countryside rolled past, vineyards heavy with grapes. Stone villages perched on hills, the Loire River glinting like a silver thread. Yet Poirot's focus was inward, piecing together the fragments of this intricate puzzle. The serpent's challenges had grown personal, each one laced with references to his past cases. The mention of betrayal in the last note gnawed at him. Could it be true? A friend turned traitor. His mind flicked to Captain Hastings, his loyal companion, whose good-natured simplicity had always been a foil to Poirot's precision. No, he thought, dismissing the doubt. But the seed was planted, and Poirot despised uncertainty. The train slowed as it approached Valmont Station, a quaint platform dwarfed by the chateau's distant silhouette. Its turrets pierced the morning mist, a fairy tale fortress with secrets etched into its stones. Poirot disembarked, his patent leather shoes clicking on the platform. A local driver, a wiry man with a face like weathered oak, awaited him with a horse-drawn cart. "Monsieur Poirot, oui?" the man asked, his accent thick. Poirot nodded, climbing aboard. The cart rattled along a cobbled road, the chateau growing larger, its windows like unblinking eyes at the chateau's gates. Poirot was met by Madame Lenny Dupont, the caretaker, a woman of indeterminate age with sharp eyes and a severe bun. "You are expected," she said, her tone clipped, leading him through a courtyard where ivy clung to statues of forgotten nobles. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and roses. Inside, the chateau was a maze of tapestries and chandeliers. Its grandeur faded but intact. Madame Dupont gestured to a spiral staircase. "The mirrored room is above. I was told to let you enter alone." Poirot ascended, his cane tapping each step. The staircase opened into a circular chamber, its walls lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Light from a single chandelier fractured into 1,000 reflections, casting Poirot's image in every direction. He stood at the center, a solitary figure multiplied into infinity. The effect was disorienting. A kaleidoscope of himself, his bowler hat, his meticulous suit, his piercing eyes. He murmured, "Mondria, the serpent plays with perception itself." On a pedestal at the room's heart sat a collection of objects. A sepia photograph of a woman in a lace dress, a letter sealed with a broken wax emblem, a pocket watch stopped at 3:17, a gramophone with a record already in place. Poirot's instincts flared. These were not random. They were a puzzle, each item a thread in the serpent's tapestry. He approached the gramophone first, turning its crank. A hiss filled the room, followed by the distorted voice of the serpent. Low and taunting. Monsieur Poirot, welcome to my hall of mirrors. Truth is a fragile thing, easily shattered. These objects tell a story of betrayal, one you know well. Solve it, and you'll find the next step. Fail, and your friend's name will be tarnished forever. The clock ticks, detective. The voice faded, leaving silence. Poirot's reflection seemed to mock him, each mirror showing a slightly different angle of his frown. He picked up the photograph, studying the woman's face. Her features were delicate, her eyes haunted. A name was scrawled on the back, Elise Moreau. The name struck a chord. Years ago, Poirot had exposed Elise, a cunning forger who'd swindled a fortune from Parisian elites. Her arrest had been a triumph, but her venomous glare as she was led away lingered in his memory. Could she be the serpent? Or was this another misdirection? The letter was next. Its wax seal bore a crested lion rampant, cracked in two. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but legible. It was addressed to Monsieur H. and spoke of a financial scheme gone awry, implicating a man Poirot knew too well, Captain Arthur Hastings. The letter detailed sums of money borrowed under false pretenses, signatures forged, and promises broken. Poirot's heart sank. Hastings, his steadfast friend, caught in such a web. Impossible, yet the letter's details were precise, referencing dates and transactions Poirot could verify. The pocket watch was heavier, its face engraved with initials E.M. Elise Moreau again. The time, 3:17, matched the hour of her arrest, a detail only someone intimate with the case would know. Poirot's mind raced. The serpent was weaving a narrative, accusing Hastings of betraying him, perhaps as a pawn in Elise's revenge. Why? To unsettle him, to distract him. He refused to let emotion cloud his logic. He returned to the gramophone, noticing a small drawer beneath it. Inside was a second letter, this one unsigned, written in a different hand. It read, "The mirrors. Show what you wish to see, but truth lies in what you cannot. Seek the hidden door." Poirot's eyes narrowed. A hidden door in a room of mirrors. He began inspecting the walls, tapping each panel with his cane. The mirrors were seamless, their edges flush, but one, near the pedestal, gave a hollow echo. He pressed it, and with a soft click, a section swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. The passage descended into darkness, the air cool and musty. Poirot lit a match, its flame casting flickering shadows. The walls were lined with portraits, their subjects obscured by dust. At the passage's end was a small chamber, its walls bare save for a single painting, a portrait of Elise Moreau, her smile sly, her eyes boring into him. Below it sat a wooden box. Inside were documents, newspaper clippings of Elise's trial, a ledger of her transactions, and a photograph of Hastings shaking hands with a man Poirot didn't recognize. The caption read, "London, 1919, a deal sealed." Poirot's stomach tightened. The evidence was damning, yet his faith in Hastings held firm. He examined the photograph closely. The man with Hastings had a scar above his left eyebrow, a detail. Poirot filed away. The ledger listed payments to a Mr. V, a name that echoed the serpent's alias, Seer Viper. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was still incomplete. He returned to the mirrored room. The objects, now a constellation of clues. The serpent's game was clear. Discredit Hastings, sow doubt, and force Poirot to question his closest ally. But Poirot was not so easily swayed. He sat on a velvet chair, closing his eyes to let his gray cells work. The accusations against Hastings were too neat, too perfectly crafted. A true betrayal would be messier, less theatrical. This was a performance, and the serpent was the director. A creak interrupted his thoughts. Madame Dupont stood at the doorway, her face pale. "Monsieur, you've been here for hours. The chateau is closing." Poirot smiled thinly. "Merci, madame, but I am not finished." She hesitated, then retreated. Poirot's gaze returned to the mirrors. The hidden door had been a clue, but the room itself was the puzzle's heart. He stood, pacing, his reflections moving with him. One mirror, slightly misaligned, caught his eye. He pressed it, and another panel opened, revealing a hidden alcove. Inside was a gramophone record labeled Truth. Poirot played it, and the serpent's voice returned. "Colder now. You cling to loyalty, Poirot, but even friends can deceive. Your Captain Hastings has secrets. Find them or lose him." The record ended with a laugh, sharp and mocking. Poirot's jaw tightened. He would not let the serpent manipulate him. The alcove held one final clue: a train ticket to London, tucked inside a book of French poetry. The ticket was for the next morning, and a line was underlined in the book: "The heart betrays before the mind." Poirot pocketed the ticket, his resolve hardening. He would return to London, confront Hastings, and unravel this accusation. If the serpent thought they could break him with doubt, they underestimated Hercule Poirot. The journey back to the station was silent, the cart's wheels crunching on gravel. The driver glanced at Poirot, curious but silent. Poirot's mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment with Hastings. Their friendship had weathered countless cases, from the mundane to the macabre. Could Hastings have hidden such a secret? The evidence suggested it, but evidence could be forged. The serpent's obsession with Elise Moreau pointed to a personal vendetta, not Hastings' guilt. At the station, Poirot boarded the train, the ticket clutched in his gloved hand. The Loire Valley faded into the dusk, the chateau a distant shadow. He thought of the mirrored room, its endless reflections, metaphor for the serpent's game. Truth was there, hidden among the distortions. He would find it, not for the serpent, but for himself and for Hastings. In his compartment, Poirot opened his notebook, sketching a timeline of Elise Moreau's case. She had been brilliant, her forgeries flawless, until Poirot noticed a discrepancy. In his signature's flourish, her arrest had humiliated her, her pride shattered. If she was the serpent, her motive was clear: revenge. But why implicate Hastings? To wound Poirot, where it hurt most his trust.
Chapter 8. Shadows in the corridor. The air in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with secrets, each breath laced with the damp chill of the fog that clung to the estate like a jealous lover. Miss Jane Marple, her shawl drawn tightly round her slight frame, moved with the quiet grace of a cat through the dimly lit gallery. The events of the past days, the piercing scream, the stolen sapphire, the cryptic note, the defaced portrait, and the poisoned greenhouse blooms had woven a tapestry of intrigue that she was determined to unravel. Her tiny spark of intuition, as she liked to call it, flickered brighter now, guiding her toward the truth hidden in the manor's shadowed corners. The gallery, with its towering portraits of Blackthorn ancestors, felt like a silent jury, watching her every step. The defaced painting of Lord Blackthorn, its eyes slashed with cerulean fury, loomed at the far end, a grim reminder of the hatred simmering beneath the manor's polished surface. Miss Marple's eyes, sharp despite her years, traced the faint scuff marks on the polished oak floor, leading toward a panel in the wainscoting that seemed slightly askew. She paused, her knitting needles clicking softly in her bag, a habit that steadied her thoughts. The marks were fresh, smudged with a trace of greenhouse mud. Curious, she thought, for a gallery so meticulously maintained. She knelt, her knees protesting faintly, and ran her fingers along the panel's edge. A faint click rewarded her efforts, and the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passage cloaked in darkness. The air within was stale, tinged with the earthy scent of mold and something sharper. Paint, perhaps. Her heart quickened, not with fear, but with the thrill of discovery. This passage, she suspected, was the killer's secret highway, a vein running through the manor's heart, connecting the gallery's violence to the greenhouse's poison. Miss Marple slipped into the passage, her small flashlight casting a thin beam across rough stone walls. The corridor was cramped, forcing her to move sideways, her shawl brushing against cobwebs that clung like ghostly fingers. She noted the details with precision: a scuff of mud here, a splintered board there, and, most telling, a torn glove caught on a protruding nail. She plucked it free, holding it to the light. The fabric was fine leather, stained with a streak of cerulean paint the same hue that marred Lord Blackthorn's portrait. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Careless, she murmured, tucking the glove into her pocket. The killer had left a breadcrumb, and she was hungry for more. The passage twisted downward, its walls growing damper as it descended. Miss Marple's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced like spectres. She steadied her breath, recalling the countless village intrigues she'd unravelled in St. Mary Mead. A stolen sapphire, a poisoned bloom, a slashed portrait. These were no different from Mrs. Hattie's missing brooch or young Tommy's. Pilfered apples, only grander in scale. The human heart, she knew, was the same everywhere, its motives laid bare by the smallest slip. The corridor opened into a wider chamber, its floor littered with debris: a broken chair, a cracked mirror, and a pile of papers yellowed with age. Miss Marple knelt again, her fingers sifting through the papers. Most were mundane old receipts, faded letters, but one caught her eye: a scrap of parchment, its edges torn, bearing the same looping script as the cryptic note from the library. The sapphire hides where hearts betray, it read, but this fragment added a new phrase. In the shadow of the past, she frowned, her mind racing. The note's author had been here, perhaps recently, and the passage linked the gallery to where. She followed the corridor further, her steps cautious. The air grew warmer, thick with the scent of earth and decay. A faint light glowed ahead, and she extinguished her flashlight, moving by instinct now. The passage ended at a wooden door, its hinges rusted but recently oiled. She pressed her ear to the wood, catching the faint rustle of movement beyond. Her pulse quickened, but she remained still, her years of quiet observation serving her well. The door creaked open an inch, revealing a sliver of the greenhouse, its glass walls misted with condensation. The wilting orchids, their petals curling under the weight of poison, stood like silent sentinels in the moonlight. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as a cloaked figure moved through the greenhouse, their silhouette blurred by the fogged glass. The figure bent over the workbench where she'd found the atrapa extract, their movements quick and furtive. She strained to see more, but the figure straightened abruptly. As if sensing her presence, Miss Marple froze, her breath shallow, as the figure turned toward the door. For a moment, she feared discovery, but the figure hesitated, then slipped out through another exit. Leaving the greenhouse silent once more, she waited, counting to 10, before easing the door open and stepping into the greenhouse. The air was heavy with the acrid tang of poison, and she covered her mouth with her shawl. Moving swiftly to the workbench, there, beside a tray of wilted blooms, lay a sapphire shard, its facets catching the moonlight like a tiny star. She picked it up, her fingers trembling with the weight of its significance. This was no mere fragment, it was a piece of the heart of Blackthorn, hidden in plain sight. The killer had been here, perhaps moments ago, and the passage connected. The gallery's vandalism to the greenhouse's treachery. Miss Marple's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. The glove, the paint, the shard, the passage, they formed a trail. But to whom? Claude Beaumont. With his cerulean-stained cuff and to perfect alibi, Dr. Isolde Wren. With her toxic experiments and nervous glances, or perhaps Clara Blackthorn, whose locket held a sapphire chip and whose secrets ran deeper than she admitted. The butler, Mr. Grayson, with his greenhouse mud and fearful eyes, could not be dismissed either. And Lady Eleanor had her shawl's cerulean thread been a coincidence, or something more? She slipped the sapphire shard into her pocket alongside the glove, her heart pounding with the thrill of the chase. The cloaked figure's escape had been narrow, but Miss Marple was not one to be deterred. She retraced her steps through the passage, her flashlight guiding her back to the gallery. As she emerged, the manor seemed quieter, the fog thicker, as if conspiring to hide the truth. She closed the panel behind her, ensuring it clicked shut, and made her way to her room. Her mind alight with possibilities. In the safety of her chamber, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she reviewed her findings. The glove, the shard, the passage, they were threads in a tapestry she was only beginning to weave. The killer had grown bold, but also careless, and she was closing in. She allowed herself a small smile, her tiny spark burning. Brighter now, a beacon in the fog of Blackthorn Manor's secrets.
Chapter 9. The Viennese gambetta trained to Vienna sliced through the Austrian Alps. Its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's racing thoughts. The Orient Express, with its polished mahogany and gleaming brass, was a cocoon of luxury, but Poirot's mind was far from the velvet upholstery or the clink of champagne flutes. The serpent's game had escalated, each clue a taunt, each challenge a step closer to a shadowy adversary whose motives remained maddeningly obscure. The cipher from the Chateau de Valmont, decoded in the quiet of his compartment, had led him hear a masked ball in Vienna, where elegance masked treachery. And a single misstep could unravel everything. Poirot adjusted his bow tie, the black sook, a stark contrast to his pristine white shirt. His reflection in the compartment's mirror showed a man composed, his mustache a perfect crescent, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of anticipation. The cipher, woven into a series of cryptic phrases, had pointed to the Palais Liechtenstein, a Baroque jewel in Vienna's heart. The ball, hosted by a reclusive financier named Baron von Kreutz, was rumored to be a nexus of secrets where Europe's elite mingled with its underbelly. The serpent's clue had been precise. A plot to destabilize a major European bank would be set in motion tonight, hidden in the swirl of waltzes and whispered deals. Poirot's task was to unmask the conspirator, K, figure known only as Monsieur Viper. Before the plan could take root, the train slowed as Vienna's lights glittered into view. Poirot gathered his cane and a small leather notebook, where he jotted the cipher's key phrases. In shadows, they dance. In masks, they plot. Find a thread in the tapestry. The words suggested a conspiracy concealed in plain sight, a thread he must pull without alerting the weaver. He stepped onto the platform, the chill of the Viennese night sharpening his senses. A carriage awaited, its driver, a silent man with a scar tracing his jawline. Poirot noted the man's guarded posture, a hired hand, perhaps, but loyal to whom? Palais Liechtenstein loomed ahead, its facade aglow with torchlight. Liveried footmen ushered guests through gilded doors, their masks a riot of feathers, jewels, and lacquered wood. Poirot's own mask, a simple black domino, allowed his eyes to roam freely. Inside, the ballroom was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across marble floors, and an orchestra's strains wove through laughter and clinking glasses. Yet, beneath the glamour, Poirot sensed a current of uneasy furtive glances, his hands brushing pockets, conversations cut short. He moved through the crowd, his diminutive stature an advantage in slipping unnoticed between towering figures. The cipher's mention of a tapestry nagged at him. Was it literal, wall hanging, hiding a clue? Or metaphorical, a pattern in the guest's behavior? He scanned the room, noting the costumes, a peacock in emerald plumes, a harlequin with diamond-patterned tights, a knight in silver filigree. Each could conceal Monsieur Viper, but the cipher's elegance suggested a subtler sign. The room's edge, a group of financiers huddled, their masks failing to hide their agitation. Poirot edged closer, catching fragments of their talk. Stocks, bonds, a bank in Zurich. One man, tall and hawkish, gestured sharply, his mask a crimson lion. Arose. Interest piqued. The man's voice carried a clipped precision, a hint of authority. Could he be Viper? Poirot filed the observation away, his gaze drifting to a woman in a sapphire gown, her mask adorned with silver thorns. She stood alone, her posture rigid, a champagne flute untouched in her hand. Her eyes, visible through the mask's slits, darted toward the financiers, then away. A thread, perhaps. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and the floor filled with swirling couples. Poirot declined to dance with the giggling countess, his attention fixed on the woman in sapphire. She moved toward a side door, her steps deliberate. He followed, weaving through the crowd, his cane tapping lightly. The door led to a corridor lined with tapestry scenes of hunts and feasts, their colors muted by age. Here was the literal tapestry, but Poirot's instincts screamed for caution. The woman paused before tapestry depicting a serpent coiled around a tree, its eyes glinting with emerald thread. She pressed a panel, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated. To follow was to risk exposure, but to linger was to lose the thread. He slipped through the panel just as it began to close, his heart pounding. The staircase was narrow, its stone steps slick with damp. A faint light glowed below, and he descended, his cane silent now. Voices echo low, urgent, male. He crouched at the stair's base, peering into a chamber, where three men stood around a table strewn with papers. The woman in sapphire was there, her mask removed, revealing sharp features and a scar across her cheek. Poirot's mind raced. Had he seen her before? Case in Brussels, perhaps, or a fleeting mention in a dossier. The hawkish man from the ballroom, his crimson lion mask discarded, spoke in a low growl. The bank's reserves are vulnerable. A single transfer, timed with the market's dip, will cripple it. Vienna's markets will follow, then Paris. The others nodded, one scribbling notes, another checking a pocket watch. The woman interjected, her voice cold. Viper demands precision. The codes are in place, but the courier must not fail. Poirot's pulse quickened. Monsieur Viper was not among them, but orchestrating from afar. The woman's role was unclear, lieutenant or pawn. He scanned the table, ledgers, a map of Zurich, and a cipher wheel, its symbols eerily similar to the one from Valmont. Keened. Those papers, but exposure now would be fatal. The men's conversation shifted to a meeting in Istanbul, a bazaar where the final codes would be exchanged. Istanbuling, another thread, pulling him eastward. A creak above startled him. He pressed against the wall as footsteps descended. A fourth figure entered, cloaked and masked, their voice distorted by a metallic device. "The detective is here," they hissed Poirot. "He's closer than you think." The room froze. The woman's eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. Poirot held his breath, his mind racing for an escape. The cloaked figure, perhaps, continued. "He's a nuisance, but predictable. Lead him to Istanbul. Let the bazaar be his trap." The group dispersed, the woman barking. Orders to secure the papers. Poirot retreated up the stairs, his movements silent but swift. Back in the ballroom, the waltz had given way to a mazurka, the crowd oblivious to the conspiracy below. He needed to act quickly. The woman in sapphire reappeared, her mask back in place, mingling as if nothing had happened. Poirot approached, his charm disarming. "Madame," he said, bowing, "your gown is a vision, but your thoughts seem elsewhere. Perhaps a dance to lift the spirits." Her eyes flickered with suspicion, but she accepted, her hand cold in his. As they moved across the floor, Poirot probed gently. "Vienna is a city of secrets, is it not? One hears whispers of banks and schemes." Her grip tightened, but she smiled thinly. "You're observant, monsieur. Some secrets are better." Left undisturbed, he pressed further, mentioning Zurich casually. Her step faltered, a telltale sign. "Zurich is lovely this time of year," she murmured, then excused herself, vanishing into the crowd. Poirot's mind whirred. She was involved, but not Viper. The cloaked figure's distorted voice lingered in his memory, calculated, familiar. He needed to confirm the Istanbul connection. Slipping into a side room, he found a servant polishing silver, his hands trembling. A few kind words and a coin loosened the man's tongue. A courier had left for the train station, carrying a sealed case. Poirot tipped his hat and hurried out, hailing a carriage to the Sud Bahnhof. The station was a hive of steam and shouting. Poirot scanned the platforms, spotting a man in a gray coat clutching a leather case. The man boarded the Orient Express, bound for Istanbul. Poirot purchased a ticket, his pulse steady now. The gang was moving east, and he was closing in. But the cloaked figure's warning echoed. A trap awaited in the bazaar. He settled into his compartment, the cipher's words replaying. In shadows, they dance. The dance was far from over. The train's whistle pierced the night as it pulled out of Vienna. Poirot opened his notebook, sketching the faces he'd seek the woman's scar, the hawkish man's sneer, the cloaked figure's shadow. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. He recalled a case from years ago, a banking scandal in Geneva, where a woman with a scarred cheek had vanished before trial. Could she be the same? With the cloaked figure, why distort their voice unless to hide a familiar tone? The serpent's game was personal, each clue a jab at his past. Morning broke over the Carpathians. The train's rhythm soothing but deceptive. Poirot breakfasted in the dining car, his eyes on the gray-coated courier. The man was nervous, his fingers drumming on the case. Poirot struck up a conversation, posing as a retired banker. "Traveling to Istanbul for business?" he asked, his tone light. The courier stiffened. muttering about antiquities. A lie, but a useful one. Poirot excused himself, noting the man's compartment number. That night, slipped into the corridor, his lockpicks silent. The courier's case yielded a single sheet of cipher matching the Whodunit wheel, detailing a transfer of funds from Zurich to an Istanbul account. The bank's collapse would trigger a domino effect, destabilizing Europe's markets. Poirot memorized the details, replacing the sheet before returning to his compartment. The serpent's plan was audacious, but flawed. Too many players, too many egos.
Chapter 10. The botanist's obsessioned greenhouse was a world of its own. A glass cathedral where the air hung heavy with the musk of soil and the sharp tang of wilting blooms. Miss Jane Marple stepped inside, her sensible shoes whispering, against the stone path, her eyes adjusting to the dim, dappled light filtering through fogged panes. The fog outside Blackthorn Manor clung to the glass like a conspirator, blurring the manor's Gothic silhouette and isolating this humid sanctuary. She had slipped away from the breakfast table, where the guests' strained pleasantries had crackled with unspoken accusations. Her tiny spark of intuition, that quiet flicker of insight, had drawn her here to Dr. Isolde Wren's domain, where poisoned orchids and a cryptic note hinted at a truth far darker than a stolen sapphire. The morning was cool, but the greenhouse was a feverish contrast, its warmth wrapping around her like a shawl. Rows of plants stretched before her, ferns with feathery fronds, vines curling like secrets, and the orchids she'd noticed days ago, their petals now curling inward, as if recoiling from some unseen threat. The faint toxic odor she'd detected before was stronger today, a bitter undertone that made her nose wrinkle. She moved carefully, her gloved hands brushing aside a low-hanging leaf, her eyes scanning for the vial of atrapa extract she'd found hidden under the workbench. It was gone now, but its absence only sharpened her focus. This was no place of mere botany. It was a stage for something far more sinister. Miss Marple paused by a tray of soil samples, each labeled in Dr. Wren's precise, angular script: Orchis muscula, 12/7, Datura stramonium, 15/7. The dates were recent, the ink fresh. Her gaze drifted to a leather-bound journal tucked beneath a pot of ferns, its edges worn but its pages crisp, as if it had been handled often. She glanced toward the greenhouse door, ensuring solitude, then eased the journal free, her pulse quickening. The cover was embossed with a faint botanical motif, and as she opened it, the scent of ink and earth rose to meet her. The entries were meticulous, a scientist's record of experiments with toxins belladonna, hemlock, and the deadly atrapa extract. But one phrase, scrawled in a hurried hand, stopped her cold. Debt repaid in bloom. Her tiny spark flared into a steady flame. The words echoed the cryptic library note. The sapphire hides where hearts betray. A debt, a betrayal, and now blooms poisoned ones, tied to the greenhouse's wilting orchids. Dr. Wren was no mere observer in this tangled affair. She was a player, perhaps a central one. Miss Marple turned the pages, her eyes racing over diagrams of flower anatomy, chemical compounds, and dosages so precise they chilled her. One entry detailed a hybrid orchid, its nectar laced with atrapa to silence a traitor. Another mentioned a family debt and a blue reckoning. the words underlined with a ferocity that suggested obsession. The implications were stark. The poisoned blooms were no accident, and Wren's work was tied to the sapphire's theft, perhaps even the midnight scream. A rustle at the entrance made her heart skip. She slipped the journal back under the fern, her movements swift but calm, and turned to see Dr. Isolde Wren framed in the doorway, her sharp cheekbones catching the light, the botanist's eyes, cold and piercing as winter frost, fixed on Miss Marple. But her voice was measured, almost amused. "Miss Marple, what a surprise! Are you cultivating a sudden interest in botany?" Her tone was polite, but her fingers twitched, betraying a flicker of unease. Miss Marple smiled, her expression as soft as her woolen shawl. "Oh, I'm no expert, Dr. Wren, but I find plants quite fascinating. They hold such secrets, don't they? These orchids, for instance, so delicate, yet so troubled." She gestured to the wilting blooms. Watching Wren's reaction, the botanist's lips tightened, and she stepped closer, her green-stained fingers brushing a leaf with forced nonchalance. "A minor blight," she said, her voice clipped. "Nothing I can't remedy." "Indeed," Miss Marple replied, her tone mild but her eyes keen. "You must be terribly clever to manage such delicate work. I heard you're studying anecdotes, such a noble pursuit." She let the words linger, noting the faint flush that crept up Wren's neck. The botanist's gaze darted to the workbench, then back to Miss Marple, her composure faltering for a heartbeat. "Anecdotes? Yes," Wren said, recovering quickly. "The world is full of poisons, Miss Marple. One must be prepared." She moved to adjust a tray of seedlings, her movements deliberate, as if to dismiss the conversation. But Miss Marple pressed gently, her voice a soft probe. "I suppose some poisons are more personal than others. A debt repaid, perhaps, in bloom." She watched Wren's hand freeze, the seedling trembling in her grip, a bead of sweat glistening at her temple. The botanist's eyes narrowed, but she laughed, a sound as brittle as the fog outside. "You have quite an imagination, Miss Marple. I'm a scientist, not a poet. Debts and betrayals belong in novels, not greenhouses." She turned away, busying herself with a watering can. But Miss Marple saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the handle too tightly. Wren was hiding something, and her dismissal of Miss Marple as a harmless spinster was a misstep. Miss Marple stepped closer, her voice softer still, almost conspiratorial. "Oh, I quite agree, Dr. Wren, but sometimes the line between science and story blurs. Take these orchids, such beauty, yet such danger, almost as if they're keeping a secret for someone." She paused, her eyes locking with Wren's, and for a moment, the greenhouse seemed to hold its breath. Wren's face was a mask, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear, quickly masked by a cold smile. "You're an observant woman, Miss Marple," Wren said, her voice low. "But observation can lead one astray. Stick to knitting. Perhaps it's safer." The barb was subtle, but Miss Marple's smile didn't waver. She inclined her head, as if conceding, but her mind was alight with the journal's revelations. Wren's experiments were no mere academic pursuit. They were a calculated step in a larger scheme, one tied to the sapphire, the scream, and perhaps a murder thwarted only by chance. I'll leave you to your work, Dr. Wren. Miss Marpley's active voice said, her tone serene. But I'll be back to admire your orchids another day. They're quite illuminating. She turned her shawl, brushing a fern, and stepped out into the fog, the greenhouse door creaking shut behind her. The manor loomed ahead, its turrets cutting through the mist, and she felt the weight of her discovery settle like a stone. Wren's journal was a map to the killer's mind, and the poisoned blooms were a warning or a promise dot as she walked. Back to the manor, the fog seemed to thin, revealing the world in sharp edges. Miss Marple's tiny spark burned steadily now, weaving together the journal's words, the poisoned orchids, and the cryptic note. Dr. Wren was no bystander. She was a thread in the tapestry of deceit, her obsession with toxins a clue to her motives. The scream, the theft, the defaced portrait were pieces of a puzzle, and Miss Marple was beginning to see the pattern. Inside the manor, the guests were gathered in the drawing room, their voices a low hum of tension. Clara Blackthorne sat by the fire, her locket glinting as she...
Chapter 11. The Bazaar's Deception. The air in Istanbul's Grand Bazaar was thick with the scent of saffron, leather, and intrigue. Hercule Poirot stepped from the sunlit street into the labyrinthine sprawl of stalls, where merchants hawked silks, spices, and secrets beneath vaulted ceilings. The Orient Express had delivered him to this ancient city at dawn, its vibrant chaos a stark contrast to the train's polished confines. His polished shoes clicked on the worn stone floor, and his eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the crowd. The serpent's latest clue-coded message, tucked into a victim's luggage, had led him here, to a merchant selling a rare book. That book, Poirot knew, held the next piece of the puzzle, a cipher pointing to Cairo. But in this den of commerce and deception, nothing was as it seemed. The bazaar pulsed with life. Vendors shouted in Turkish, Arabic, and broken English, their voices blending with the clink of coins and the rustle of fabric. A boy darted past, balancing a tray of steaming tea glasses. An old woman in a headscarf muttered prayers over a basket of pomegranates. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mustache twitching as he navigated the narrow alleys. The clue had been precise. Seek the merchant of forgotten words, where the serpent's tongue lies hidden in vellum. He deduced it referred to a bookseller, but the bazaar housed dozens, each stall a trove of manuscripts, maps, and mysteries. His first stop was a corner stall draped in crimson cloth, where a wiry man with a hooked nose polished a brass lamp. Monsieur Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet. I seek a rare book, one that speaks of serpents and secrets. The man's eyes narrowed, his fingers pausing on the lamp. Books are many, Effendi, he replied, his accent thick, but serpents, dangerous words. Perhaps you mean old Mustafa, 3 alleys down. He trades in forbidden tales. Poirot tipped his hat, sensing the man's evasion, but filing it away. The serpent's game thrived on misdirection. 3 alleys later, Mustafa's stall emerged, like a scholar's fever dream. Shelves groaned under leather-bound tomes, their spines cracked and gilded. Mustafa himself was a reliquite, bearded, spectacled, his hands stained with ink. Welcome, traveler, he rasped, peering over his glasses. You seek knowledge, yes, or something more? Poirot's lips curved slightly. Teak, book that hides a serpent's truth, monsieur. One that whispers of distant sands. Stefan's gaze flickered, a spark of recognition. He shuffled to a locked chest. producing a key from his robe. "This," he said, lifting a thin volume bound in black calfskin, "is no ordinary book. Its pages guard a cipher. But knowledge has a price." Poirot's gray cells hummed. Book's cover bore a faint embossing of a coiled serpent, its eyes 2 tiny emeralds. "Name your price," he said, though he knew the true cost lay in the game itself. Mustapha leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "A secret for a secret. Tell me, monsieur, what drives a man like you to chase shadows?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The pursuit of truth, monsieur, and the satisfaction of outwitting those who hide it." Mustapha chuckled, sliding the book across the counter. "Take it then, but beware the serpent's bite is swift." As Poirot opened the book, a slip of paper fell out, its edges singed. The text was a jumble of letters, a polybious square cipher, one he'd encountered in a case involving a stolen diplomatic pouch. Kay pocketed the paper, his mind already unraveling its grid. But before he could thank Mustapha, a shadow moved behind a stack of manuscripts. Kay, a boy no older than 12, with quick hands and quicker eyes, snatched a brass key from Poirot's coat pockets, the key he'd used to unlock his suitcase on the Orient Express. The thief bolted, weaving through the crowd like a minnow through reeds. Poirot gave chase, his cane tapping rhythmically as he dodged merchants and baskets. The boy was fast, but Poirot's mind was faster. He noted the boy's path left at the spice stall, right at the carpet vendor, anticipating his route. The bazaar's layout, a maze to most, was a puzzle to Poirot, its alleys forming a grid he could navigate. He cut through a narrow passage, emerging just as the boy darted past. With a swift flick of his cane, Poirot tripped the lad, who tumbled into a pile of rugs, the key skittering across the stones. "Mon petit," Poirot said, retrieving the key. "You were bold, but not bold enough." The boy, panting, glared up at him. "Wasn't my idea, Fendi. The cloaked one paid me. Said to take the key and run." Poirot's pulse quickened. "The serpent. Where is this cloaked one?" he demanded. Boy pointed to a shadowed archway across the bazaar. "There, but you won't catch him. They're like smoke." Poirot pressed a coin into the boy's hand. "It's for your trouble. Now vanish as well as your master." The archway led to a quieter section of the bazaar, where antiques and relics replaced vibrant silks. Poirot's eyes scanned for a cloaked figure, but the crowd was a tapestry of faces, merchants, tourists, locals. His instincts screamed of a trap. Case, the serpent had orchestrated the theft to lure him here. But why? Case slipped the ciphered paper from his pocket, decoding it mentally as he walked. The polybious square yielded a phrase: Cairo's spectacle beneath the falcon's gaze. Cairo, a public event, perhaps a festival or auction, watched by a falcon, likely a code name or symbol. The serpent's trail was clear, but the key's theft puzzled him. It was no ordinary key. It fit his safe in his London flat, one holding sensitive case notes. Had the serpent known its significance? A glint of metal caught his eye. A stall displayed ornate locks and keys, their craftsmanship exquisite. The vendor, a woman with coal-lined eyes, watched him approach. "You seek something special, monsieur?" she asked, her voice lilting. Poirot smiled. "Perhaps a key to unlock a mystery, or one to replace what was stolen." Her laughter was like bells. "Stolen, you say? The bazaar takes what it wants, but look here." She held up a brass key, its head shaped like a serpent's coil. "This unlocks more than doors. Fits a safe in the old quarter, near the Blue Mosque. A man left it with me, cloaked and quiet. Said someone would come." Poirot's heart raced. The serpent was toying with him, planting clues like breadcrumbs. He purchased the key, its weight heavy in his hand. The safe, he deduced, was the next step. But as he turned to leave, a commotion erupted. A man in a fez shouted, "Thief!" pointing at a figure in a dark cloak slipping through the crowd. Poirot pursued, his cane a steady rhythm. The figure moved with purpose, ducking into a courtyard where the bazaar's noise faded. There, beneath a fig tree, stood a rusted safe, its door ajar. Side was a single envelope, sealed with the scarlet serpent. Poirot opened it, finding a train ticket to Cairo and a note. "The spectacle awaits, Monsieur Poirot. But first, survive the bazaar." Crack of splintering wood made him spin. The cloaked figure had circled back, now wielding a curved dagger. Poirot sidestepped, his cane parrying the blade with a clang. "You are bold, monsieur," he said, his voice calm despite the danger, but clumsy. He hooked the figure's ankle, sending them sprawling. The hood fell, revealing not the serpent, but a hired thug, his eyes wide with fear. "She paid me," he gasped. "The woman in black. She's watching you." Poirot bound the man with a cord from a nearby stall, leaving him for the local police. The woman in black, Marianne Duval, perhaps. The mastermind he'd imprisoned years ago, now free and weaving this elaborate game. He clutched the ticket, his mind racing. Cairo's spectacle was likely a public event, a stage for the serpent's next move. But the bazaar wasn't done with him yet. As he retraced his steps, a street performer juggled flaming torches, drawing a crowd. Among them, Poirot spotted a woman in a black veil. Her eyes locked on him, vanished before he could approach, leaving only a scent of jasmine in the air. At Mustapha's stall, Poirot returned to the book. Its pages, when held to the light, revealed a watermark of falcon clutching a scroll. The cipher's reference to the falcon's gaze clicked. The spectacle was no mere event. It was a transaction, likely an auction or exchange, overseen by someone codenamed Falcon. He purchased a steamer ticket to Cairo, boarding a ship that evening. As the Bosphorus glittered under the stars, Poirot stood on deck, the new key in his pocket. The serpent's game was escalating, each clue a thread in a tapestry of vengeance. Cairo awaited, its sands hiding the next challenge. Its little gray cells burned with purpose, the thrill of the hunt sharper than ever. The ship's horn sounded, cutting through the night. Poirot sipped a coffee, its bitterness grounding him. The bazaar had tested his reflexes and resolve, but it was merely a prelude. In Cairo, the serpent's spectacle would unfold, and he would be ready. The game was far from over, and Hercule Poirot never lost. Chapter 12. The Cairo Conspiracy. The sun hung low over Cairo, casting a molten glow across the Nile's rippling surface. Hercule Poirot stepped off the steamer, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dusty dock. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and diesel, a heady mix that clung to the bustling chaos of the city. His journey from Istanbul had been restless. The coded message from the bazaar burning in his mind, the serpent coils where the past is unearthed. Cairo, with its ancient sands and whispered secrets, was the perfect stage for the serpents. Next move, Poirot adjusted his hat, his gray cells already dissecting the clue. An archaeological dig, no doubt something grand, something that could ripple through nations if disrupted. The game was nearing its end, and he could feel the serpent's shadow closing in. He hailed a rickety taxi, its driver a wiry man with a gap-toothed grin, to the Giza Plateau. Poirot instructed, his French accent crisp against the driver's rapid Arabic. The man nodded, weaving through streets alive with vendors hawking spices, children darting between donkey carts, and the distant call of a muezzin. Poirot's eyes scanned the city, alert for any sign of pursuit. The serpent had proven elusive, their network sprawling across continents. But here, in Cairo, he sensed a tightening of the news weather around him or his adversary. He could not yet say that. At Giza, the pyramids loomed, their ancient stones indifferent to the modern clamor below. Tents dotted the plateau, part of an international excavation led by Dr. Evelyn Warwick, a British archaeologist whose name had surfaced in Poirot's inquiries. Her dig, funded by a consortium of European and Egyptian investors, aimed to uncover a rumored chamber beneath the Great Pyramid, a find that could rewrite history or destabilize it, Poirot thought, if the serpent had their way. He approached the site, his cane tapping rhythmically against the sand, drawing curious glances from workers unloading crates. A young Egyptian assistant, Omar, greeted him with a wary nod. "Dr. Warwick is in the main tent, Effendi," he said, gesturing toward a canvas structure flapping in the desert wind. Poirot thanked him, noting the boy's nervous glance toward a nearby ridge, where a lone figure stood silhouetted against the sunset, a guard, or one of the serpent's pawns. Poirot filed the observation away, his instincts humming. Inside the tent, Dr. Warwick was a whirlwind of energy, her auburn hair escaping a loose bun as she pored over maps. She looked up, her green eyes sharp with suspicion. "Monsieur Poirot." "The detective. I wasn't expecting visitors." Her tone was polite, but guarded, her British accent clipped. "Forgive the intrusion," Madame Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I am here on a matter most urgent. I believe your excavation is in peril." He chose his words carefully, watching her reaction. Her hand paused over a map, but her face betrayed nothing. "Peril," she echoed, raising an eyebrow. "This is Cairo, monsieur. Danger is as common as sand. Be specific." Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. "Criminal known as the Serpent seeks to sabotage your work. Their motives are unclear, but their methods are precise. I have followed their trail from London to Istanbul, and now here. Have you noticed anything unusual? Strangers among your crew, perhaps?" Dr. Warwick's eyes flickered, a crack in her composure. "We've had issues," she admitted. "Tools missing, maps altered, a worker caught tampering with equipment. I thought it was local sabotage rival diggers, perhaps, but you're suggesting something larger." "Much larger," Poirot replied. "The Serpent does not act for petty gain. Their game is one of intellect, and I am their opponent. But you, madame, are their target." She crossed her arms, skeptical, but intrigued. "And what do you propose?" "Allow me to join your team, incognito, okay? I shall pose as an archaeologist, Belgian enthusiast, perhaps, eager to fund your work. It will give me access to observe, to deduce. The Serpent is near. I am certain." Dr. Warwick hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. But if you're wrong, you're wasting my time. And if you're right, we're all in danger." By dusk, Poirot had donned a linen suit and a false name, Henry Dubois, amateur historian. He mingled with the crew, his keen eyes noting every detail, the nervous glances of a French surveyor, the overly familiar banter of an American foreman, the quiet efficiency of an Egyptian laborer named Khalid. The dig site buzzed with activity, workers hauling baskets of earth, while floodlights cast eerie shadows across the pyramids. Poirot's task was to uncover the Serpent's plan before it struck, but the desert held its secrets tightly. That night, under a canopy of stars, Poirot studied the site's layout. The main excavation focused on a shaft beneath the Great Pyramid, rumored to lead to a chamber of Khufu's treasurer, filled with artifacts that could spark diplomatic tensions if mishandled. The Serpent's interest likely lay in chaos. Disrupting the dig could inflame relations between Egypt and its foreign investors, perhaps even trigger a scandal. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues: the stolen book in Istanbul, the forged painting in Paris, the poisoned courier on the Orient Express. Each move was theatrical, designed to taunt him while advancing a larger scheme. A scream shattered the silence. Poirot hurried toward the sound, finding a worker sprawled beside a collapsed scaffold, clutching his leg. It wasn't an accident. The man gasped, his face pale. Someone cut the ropes. Poirot examined the scaffold, noting the clean slice of a blade. Sabotage, deliberate and precise. He questioned the worker, learning of a cloaked figure seen near the shaft earlier that evening. Serpent's signature the next morning. Poirot joined a team descending into the shaft, a narrow passage carved into the bedrock. The air was cool and musty, the walls etched with faded hieroglyphs. Dr. Warwick led the group, her torch illuminating the path. "We're close to the chamber," she said, her voice echoing. "But the deeper we go, the more accidents we have." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows. At a bend in the tunnel, he spotted a faint carving of serpent coiled around a staff, a warning or a boast. As they reached a sealed stone door, Poirot's attention shifted to the crew. Kia, French surveyor Pierre, lagged behind, his hands trembling as he sketched the door's inscriptions. Poirot approached, his tone casual. "You seem troubled, monsieur. Is the desert air not to your liking?" Pierre started, dropping his pencil. "It's nothing," he muttered, but his eyes darted toward Khalid, who was prying at the door with a crowbar. Poirot noted the exchange, his suspicions deepening. The door gave way with a groan, revealing a chamber glittering with gold antechamber to the rumored treasury. Statues of Anubis flanked a central altar, where a stone tablet lay inscribed with a riddle. "For guardians stand. One speaks true. Name the liar, or the sands consume you." Dr. Warwick frowned. "A puzzle. This wasn't in our surveys." Poirot's heart quickened. The serpent had been here, weaving their game into the very stones. Steed the statues, each holding a scroll with a statement. Anubis north. The liar is south. Anubis south. The liar is west. Anubis west. The liar is east. Anubis east. The liar is north. Toros, Graycel's word. A classic logic puzzle, but with a twist. The serpent's riddles would never stray forward. Assuming one statue told the truth, he tested each scenario. If north was true, south was the liar. But south's statement contradicted west. If south was true, west was the liar. But west's claim looped back to east. After a moment's calculation, Poirot deduced that east was the liar's statement. The liar is north was false, making north's statement true. He pressed the scroll of Anubis east, and a hidden mechanism clicked, revealing a passage deeper into the chamber. The crew gasped, but Poirot's triumph was short-lived. A low rumble shook the chamber, and sand began pouring from vents in the ceiling. The riddle was a trap. Dr. Warwick shouted, urging the team back. Poirot grabbed the tablet, noting a faint serpent etched on its edge, and followed. They emerged, coughing into the daylight, but Pierre was missing. Khalid claimed he'd seen him slip away during the chaos. Key Rose's suspicions crystallized. Pierre was either the serpent or their agent. That evening, Poirot confronted Dr. Warwick in her tent. "Madame, I believe Pierre is compromised. His behavior is inconsistent with an innocent man." She nodded grimly, revealing that Pierre had joined the team late, recommended by an anonymous donor. Together, they devised a plan to lure him out. Poirot spread word of a breakthrough in the chamber, claiming a priceless artifact had been found. Pierre was the serpent's pawn. He would act at midnight. Poirot hid near the shaft, his cane at the ready. Sure enough, Pierre crept toward the entrance, a satchel slung over his shoulder. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Monsieur Pierre, your game is over. Reveal your master, or face the consequences." Pierre froze, then laughed a cold, unfamiliar sound. "You're clever, Poirot, but you're too late." He hurled a smoke bomb, the tent filling with choking fumes. Poirot lunged, grappling with Pierre in the haze. The surveyor was stronger than he looked, but Poirot's agility prevailed, pinning him to the ground. As the smoke cleared, Poirot found a note in Pierre's satchel. The serpent strikes at dawn. The chamber holds the key. Dawn broke over Giza, the air tense with anticipation. Poirot, Dr. Warwick, and a trusted Egyptian guard, Mustafa, re-entered the chamber, the tablet in hand. The deeper passage led to a second door, one inscribed with a map of the Nile in a single word: Duval. Poirot's blood ran cold. Marianne Duval, the criminal mastermind he'd imprisoned years ago, was the serpent. Her vendetta was personal, her every move designed to humiliate him. The map pointed to a hidden vault beneath the chamber, rigged with explosives. Duval's plan was clear: destroy the dig, frame Poirot for the sabotage, spark an international crisis with Mustafa's help. Poirot disarmed the explosives, his steady hands defying the ticking clock. But as they emerged, a cloaked figure awaited Duval herself, her eyes blazing with triumph. "You've lost, Poirot," she hissed. "The world will know you as a failure." She raised a pistol, but Mustafa tackled her, the shot going wide. In the struggle, Poirot seized her satchel, finding a final clue: a map to a London warehouse. Duval was apprehended, but her laughter echoed as she was led away. "Okay, the game isn't over, Poirot." Exhausted but resolute, Poirot boarded a steamer. Back to London, the map clutched tightly. The Cairo conspiracy had been thwarted, but the serpent's final move awaited. His gray cells burned with purpose, ready to end the duel once and for all. Chapter 13. The London Reckoning. The fog clung to London's streets like a conspirator, shrouding the city in a damp, conspiratorial haze. Hercule Poirot stepped from the hansom cab, his polished shoes clicking against the wet cobblestones of Wapping Stocklands. The air carried the briny tang of the Thames, mingled with coal smoke and a faint, acute scent of rusting iron. Before him loomed a derelict warehouse, its windows black as pitch, its brick facade crumbling like a forgotten empire. This was the final stage of the serpent's game, the culmination of a chase that had spanned continents, riddles, and the shadows of his own past. Poirot adjusted his overcoat, his gloved fingers brushing the silver handle of his cannon weapon, as much as a prop. His mustache, immaculate despite the journey, twitched as he scanned the surroundings. The warehouse stood solitary, flanked by skeletal cranes and abandoned crates, their splintered wood slick with mist. A single gas lamp flickered, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to writhe like serpents. The clue from Cairo, a scrap of paper with coordinates and the words "checkmate awaits," had led him here. The game was nearing its end, and Poirot's little gray cells hummed with anticipation. He approached the warehouse door, rusted slab of iron with a faint etching, a serpent coiled around a chess pawn. The symbol was the serpent's signature, a taunt woven into every challenge. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "K," he murmured. "You think to outwit Poirot with your theatrics? We shall see." K pushed the door, expecting resistance, but it swung open with a groan, revealing a cavernous interior lit by a single chandelier, its candles dripping wax onto the floor below. The warehouse was a labyrinth of crates and shadows, its high ceiling lost in darkness. At its center stood a table, draped in black velvet, and upon it a chessboard. The pieces gleamed in the candlelight, carved from ebony and ivory, each one a miniature sculpture. But these were no ordinary pieces. As Poirot drew closer, he saw that each bore a face, etched with uncanny detail, faces from his past cases. The Black King resembled Victor Crane, the poisoner from Blackthorn Manor. A white bishop bore the likeness of Elise Moreau, the fraudster from the Chateau de Valmont. The pawns, knights, and rooks were all there. A gallery of triumphs and tragedies, cage piece a reminder of lives altered by his relentless pursuit of truth. Poirot's breath caught. Kay's serpent had turned his career into a game board, a mockery of his legacy. He circled the table, his cane tapping rhythmically, his mind dissecting the setup. A note lay beside the board, its scarlet ink stark against the parchment. Monsieur Poirot, your move, each piece you touch will reveal the truth. Choose wisely, for the game ends only when the king falls. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over a black pawn, a young woman he recognized as Clara Webb, a thief he'd exposed in a minor case years ago. He lifted the piece, and a mechanism clicked beneath the board. A panel in the floor slid open, revealing a leather-bound journal. Poirot retrieved it, his gloves protecting the pages as he opened it. The entries were written in a precise hand, detailing Clara's descent into ruin after her arrest, her family's shame, her imprisonment, her eventual death in a workhouse. The final line in the serpent's scarlet ink read, "Your justice, Poirot, is a blade that cuts too deep." His jaw tightened. The serpent wanted him to doubt, to question the righteousness of his work. But Poirot had faced such taunts before. He replaced the pawn and chose another white knight, its face that of a smuggler from Dorset. Another click, another panel, this time revealing a photograph of a child, tear-stained, clutching a letter. The letter described the smuggler's family, left destitute after Poirot's intervention. The serpent's note: "Do you see, Poirot? Your victories breed misery." The game was clear now. Each move forced him to confront the collateral damage of his cases, to weigh his triumphs against their human cost. The serpent was not merely challenging his intellect, but his conscience. Poirot straightened, his eyes gleaming with defiance. "You think to break Hercule Poirot with guilt? Nan, I see your game, and I will play it to the end." He moved a black rook, and the chandelier above flickered, casting eerie shadows. A hidden door in the wall creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Poirot's instincts screamed caution, but his curiosity was a stronger force. He descended, the air growing colder, the scent of damp stone replacing the warehouse's musty odor. The staircase ended in a chamber, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected Poirot's image 1,000 times over. In the center stood another chessboard, identical to the first, but this one was flanked by 2 chairs, one empty, one occupied. The serpent sat cloaked in black, their face hidden by a silver mask etched with serpentine coils. Their hands, gloved in black leather, rested on the table. One holding a chess piece of white queen, its face unmistakably that of Marianne Duval, the criminal mastermind Poirot had imprisoned years ago. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," the serpent said, their voice a low, distorted hiss. "Neither male nor female. You followed my breadcrumbs across Europe. Now, the final challenge. Defeat me, or lose everything." Poirot seated himself, his posture impeccable, his gaze locked on the mask. "Mademoiselle, perhaps, monsieur, you have gone to great lengths to orchestrate this drama. But Poirot does not fear shadows. Reveal yourself, and let us end this charade." The serpent laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Not yet. First, we play. Each move you make will unlock a memory. Each memory will bring you closer to my identity or to your ruin." They pushed the white queen forward, and the mirrors shimmered, projecting an image. A courtroom, years ago, where Poirot had testified against Marianne Duval. Her face, twisted with rage, filled the mirrors, her voice echoing. "You'll pay for this, Poirot." He moved a black bishop, countering the queen. The mirrors shifted, showing a different scene. A young man, Marianne's brother, weeping as he read of her conviction. The serpent leaned forward. "You destroyed her, Poirot, and through her, you destroyed others. Do you even remember their names?" Poirot's fingers tightened on his cane. "I remember every case. every face. But justice is not a game of sentiment. Set. It is a necessity. He moved a night, and the mirrors showed another memory. Captain Hastings, his loyal friend, implicated in the forged documents from the Chateau de Valmont. The serpent's voice grew sharper. Even your friends suffer for your arrogance. Hastings trusted you, yet you doubted him. Poirot's eyes flashed. Nuff, you twist the truth too. Suit your narrative. Hastings is innocent, and I will prove it. He moved a ruck, aggressive, now, at the mirrors, revealed a new scene. The Viennese masked ball, where Poirot had thwarted the serpent's banking plot. The serpent's gloved hand trembled slightly, betraying a crack in their composure. You're reckless, Poirot. You think you see everything, but you're blind to the cost. The game continued, each move a duel of intellect and will. The mirrors flashed with memories cases. 1. Lives altered, enemies made. Poirot's mind worked furiously, piecing together the serpent's motives. Quaz pointed to Marianne Duval, but something felt off. Her imprisonment had been secure. Her release, unlikely. Was the serpent truly her, or someone using her name to torment him? He moved upon, and the mirrors showed a final memory. A young woman, not Marianne, but someone resembling her, standing at a gravesite. The serpent's voice grew quieter. You took everything from me, Poirot. My sister, my future, my name. Okay, I take your legacy. Poirot leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Your sister. Then, you are not Marianne Duval, but her kin. A sibling, perhaps, seeking vengeance. He moved the black king, a bold check. The serpent froze, their mask glinting in the candlelight. Very clever, Poirot, but you're too late. They stood, knocking over the chessboard, the pieces scattering like fallen soldiers. The mirrors shattered, revealing hidden passages behind them. The serpent darted toward one, but Poirot was faster, his cane hooking their ankle. They stumbled, and he seized their arm, ripping off the mask. The face beneath was not Marianne Duval's, but that of Celeste Duval, her younger sister. Her eyes burning with hatred. You ruined us, she spat. Marianne died in that prison because of you. Spent years planning this, studying your cases, your weaknesses. You think you've won, but I've exposed your flaws to the world. Poirot held her firmly, his voice calm but unyielding. You have played a fine game, mademoiselle Celeste, but you forget one thing. Poirot does not falter. Your sister chose her path, and you chose yours. Vengeance is a poor substitute for justice. Footsteps echoed above Hastings, and the police, alerted by Poirot's earlier message. Celeste struggled, but Poirot's grip was iron. The game is over, he said. You have lost. As the police took her away, Poirot stood amid the shattered mirrors, the chess pieces at his feet. The warehouse felt emptier now, its shadows less menacing. Key picked up the white queen, Marianne's face staring back at him. Justice is never clean, he murmured, but it is necessary. He walked into the fog, his cane tapping a steady rhythm, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The serpent was defeated, but Poirot knew the world would always have another riddle, another villain, another game, and he would be ready.
Chapter 14. The tiny sparkling test ballroom of Blackthorn Manor glowed with a soft, golden light, its chandeliers casting intricate patterns across the polished oak floor. The fog that had clung to the estate for days had finally begun to lift, as if the manor itself sensed the approaching resolution. Miss Jane Marple stood at the center of the room, her small frame unassuming yet commanding, her grey shawl draped neatly over her shoulders. The guests were gathered around her, their faces a mixture of curiosity, unease, and thinly veiled dread. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn sat near the fireplace, her hands folded tightly in her lap. her eyes darting between Miss Marple and the others. Clara Blackthorne, clutching her locket, stood by the tall windows, her expression guarded. Dr. Isolde Wren leaned against a pillar, her angular face pale but defiant, while Mr. Grayson, the butler, hovered near the door, his polished shoes betraying a faint smudge of greenhouse mud. And Claude Beaumont, the diplomat, lounged in an armchair with a practiced nonchalance, though his fingers twitched against the armrest, betraying his nerves. Miss Marple's voice, when she spoke, was calm but carried the weight of certainty. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her eyes sweeping the room, missing nothing. "I've asked you all here because a crime has been committed in this house, a theft, a betrayal, and very nearly a murder. The heart of Blackthorn, the sapphire that binds this family's legacy, was stolen." And a scream woke us all to the danger lurking within these walls. But tonight, I intend to put an end to this mystery. The truth, as I've found, often lies in the smallest details. A tiny spark that, once ignited, illuminates everything. The room was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Eleanor's fingers tightened, and Clara's locket gleamed faintly in the candlelight. Isolde's gaze flickered to the floor, while Grayson shifted his weight, his eyes fixed on Miss Marple. Beaumont, however, offered a thin smile. "A charming speech, Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth as ever. "But surely you don't mean to accuse one of us? We're all respectable people here." "Respectability," Miss Marple replied, her tone mild but pointed, "is a mask somewhere more convincingly than others. Let us begin with the facts." She stepped forward, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, as if she were merely discussing the weather in St. Mary Mead. "2 nights ago, a scream shattered the peace of this manor. The heart of Blackthorn was stolen, a priceless sapphire that Lady Eleanor cherished not just for its value, but for its history. A cryptic note was found in the library. A portrait was defaced with rare cerulean paint. Poisoned orchids were discovered in the greenhouse, and a hidden passage revealed. A trail of clues. Each of these pointed to a web of deceit, and each of you, in your own way, has played a part in it." A murmur rippled through the room, but Miss Marple raised a hand, silencing it. "Let me start with the scream," she continued. "It was Clara's, wasn't it?" She turned to the heiress, whose face paled as all eyes fell on her. "You discovered something that night, Clara, something that terrified you. Not the theft itself, but the person behind it. You saw someone you trusted, someone you never suspected, plotting in the shadows." Clara's hand tightened around her locket, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to do. I saw him in the gallery, near the portrait. I thought he was just passing through, but then I saw the paint on his hands, and I screamed." Miss Marple nodded, her expression softening. "And who did you see, Clara?" Clara's eyes darted to Beaumont, then away. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, her voice trembling. "Claude Beaumont." A gasp escaped Eleanor, and Isolde's head snapped up. Beaumont's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair. "This is absurd," he said, his tone sharp now. "Clara, you must be mistaken. I was in my room, writing letters. I've told you all this. Indeed you have, Miss Marple said, her voice unshaken. But lies, Mr. Beaumont, have a way of unraveling. Let us examine the evidence. She reached into her reticule and produced a small folded handkerchief, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a wilted orchid petal and a scrap of paper stained with cerulean paint. These I found in the greenhouse and the hidden passage. The petal carries the scent of atrapa extract deadly nightshade, hidden by Dr. Wren in her workbench. The paper matches the note I found in the library. The sapphire hides where hearts betray, and both, Mr. Beaumont, lead directly to you. Beaumont laughed, a brittle sound that echoed in the quiet room. A petal and a scrap of paper, hardly evidence. Miss Marple, you're grasping at straws, am I, miss? Marple's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. Then let us consider the portrait of Lord Blackthorn, slashed with cerulean paint, a rare pigment, imported from abroad, accessible only to someone with foreign connections. You, Mr. Beaumont, boasted of your travels in Paris and Vienna, where such paint is common, and I noticed, on the night of the scream, a faint smudge of that same paint on your cuff, a small detail, but a telling one. Beaumont's hand twitched toward his sleeve, then stilled. A coincidence, he said, but his voice had lost its polish. I'm a diplomat, not an artist. I don't dabble in paint. Perhaps not, Miss Marple conceded, but you do dabble in blackmail. I found a letter you tried to burn, addressed to an accomplice, mentioning a blue debt and the sapphires theft. You were using the heart of Blackthorn to settle your own debts, weren't you? Debts that had nothing to do with the Blackthorn family, but everything to do with your own reckless ventures abroad. Eleanor stood, her face ashen. Claude, is this true? You were my husband's friend. He trusted you? Beaumont's composure cracked, his eyes narrowing. Your husband was a fool, Eleanor. He hid the sapphire to protect his wastrel brother, but it was mine by right. I earned it. After all I did for this family, earned it. Miss Marple's voice was sharp now, cutting through his bluster. You stole it, Mr. Beaumont. And when Dr. Wren discovered your plan, you poisoned her, orchids to silence her. The atrapa extract was your warning, a threat to anyone who came too close to the truth. But you underestimated Isolde's knowledge of toxins and Clara's courage in speaking out. Isolde stepped forward, her voice low but fierce. I found the vial you hid in my greenhouse, she said, glaring at Beaumont. You thought you could pin it on me, make me look like the villain. But I was studying antidotes, not poisons. I knew what you were planning the moment I saw those orchids wilt. Miss Marple nodded, turning back to Beaumont. And then there's the hidden passage leading from the gallery to the greenhouse. You used it to move unseen, to plant the vial, to deface the portrait, to create chaos and divert suspicion. But you left traces, muddy footprints, a torn glove, that scrap of paper. You were clever, Mr. Beaumont, but not clever enough. Grayson, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his voice heavy with guilt. I saw him, he admitted, that night in the passage. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew it wasn't right. I should have said something sooner. You did well to speak now, Mr. Grayson, Miss Marple said gently. It takes courage to admit one's silence. Beaumont surged to his feet, his face flushed with anger. This is preposterous. You have no proof, just theories and scraps. You can't tie me to the sapphire. Oh, but I can, Miss Marple said, her voice steady as she turned to Clara. Clara, would you show us your locket, please? Clara hesitated, then unclasped the locket and handed it to Miss Marple. The room watched in silence as she opened it, revealing a tiny chip of sapphire nestled inside. This, Miss Marple said, holding it up to the light, is a fragment of the heart of Blackthorn. Clara's brother stole the sapphire years ago, but he returned it before his disappearance, hiding it in this locket for safekeeping. You, Mr. Beaumont, discovered this and stole it again, intending to sell it to cover your debts. But Clara's scream interrupted your plans, and you've been scrambling to cover your tracks ever since. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Clara, you knew. Why didn't you tell me? I was afraid, Clara whispered. I thought if I revealed it, I'd lose everything, my place in this family, my brother's memory. I didn't know who to trust. Miss Marple placed a reassuring hand on Clara's arm. You trusted me. In the end, that was enough. She turned back to Beaumont, whose face was now a mask of fury and fear. The tiny spark that began this, Mr. Beaumont, was the paint on your cuff. It was the first clue that told me you were not what you seemed. From there, every step you took, every lie, every threat only fanned the flame. The sapphire is returned, Dr. Wren is safe, and you, sir, are finished. Beaumont lunged toward the door, but Grayson was faster, blocking his path with surprising strength. Not so fast, sir, the butler said, his voice firm. Two footmen, summoned by Eleanor, appeared in the doorway, their expressions resolute. Take him to the library, Eleanor ordered, her voice trembling but steady. The constable has been sent for. He'll answer for this, as Beaumont was. Led away, his protests fading into the hall. The room seemed to exhale. Clara sank into a chair, her locket clutched tightly in her hand. Isolde approached Miss Marple.
Poirot paused, his fingers steepled. Revenge, Madame Oliver. But not the crude sort. Marianne was a woman of intellect, once a respected art dealer before her fall. Exposure of her fraud in the Morrow case cost her everything, her reputation, her freedom, her pride. She spent years in prison, plotting this duel, believing she could prove herself my superior. Stillingfleet leaned back, swirling his wine. Sounds like a classic case of narcissistic obsession. She didn't just want to beat you, she wanted to be you. The mastermind, untouchable, but you turned her own game against her. Seismith, Poirot said. Her challenges were brilliant, but they betrayed her. Each clue, each taunt, revealed her mind. In her need to prove her superiority, she underestimated the simplicity of logic. Hastings, ever the loyal friend, raised his glass. To logic then, and to you, Poirot, for showing her who's boss. The group laughed, clinking glasses, but Poirot's smile was tempered. He rose, pacing to the window, his silhouette framed against the city lights. Logic is a tool, Hastings, but it is not infallible. This case, it has made me question. Each victory leaves a ripple, families disrupted, lives altered. Marianne's hatred was born of my actions. Am I, in some way, responsible? Room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over them. Japp cleared his throat. Now, look here, Poirot. You catch criminals? You make the world safer. Some nutter like Duval takes it personally. That's on her, not you. Ariadne nodded vigorously. He's right. You can't carry everyone's grudges. You're not a saint, Poirot. You're a detective. A dashed good one. Poirot turned, his eyes softening. Mercy, my friends, your faith is a balm. But I am decided. I shall take a brief retirement to the countryside. A village, perhaps, where the only mysteries are why the baker's bread is not as fresh as it should be. Laughter broke the tension, and the conversation turned to lighter matters. Hastings' golf game. Ariadne's latest novel, Stillingfleet's Tales of Eccentric Patience. Yet, as the evening wore on, Poirot's mind wandered. Kate. He excused himself briefly, stepping onto the balcony. The cool night air carried the scent of rain, and London sprawled before him. A labyrinth of secrets he had spent a lifetime navigating. He thought of Marianne's final moments in the warehouse, her voice trembling with rage as she accused him of destroying her. You think you're justice, she had spat, but you're just a man playing God. Her words had stung, not because they were true, but because they echoed a doubt he rarely allowed himself to face. Was his pursuit of order a noble quest, or a futile attempt to impose sense on a chaotic world? The door behind him creaked, and Miss Lemon joined him, her expression gentle. You're troubled, Monsieur Poirot. Seen it before, after the big cases. You carry too much. Poirot sighed, his fingers tracing the balcony railing. Perhaps, Miss Lemon, but it is the burden of the detective, Nan, to see the truth, even when it is painful. She nodded, practical as ever. Then see this truth. You've saved countless lives. Marianne Duval chose her path. You didn't make her a criminal. He smiled faintly. You are wise, Miss Lemon. Wiser, perhaps, than I. Back inside, the group had moved to the sitting room, where Ariadne was regaling them with a plot idea inspired by the case. A masked villain, a trail of riddles across Europe. It's too perfect. I'll call it The Serpent's Gambit. What do you think, Poirot? He rejoined them, his mood lifting. A fine title, madame, but you must promise not to make the detective too theatrical. More laughter followed, and Poirot felt the warmth of camaraderie seep into him. The night stretched on, filled with stories, wine, and the comfort of friendship. As his guests departed, each offered words of encouragement, urging him to rest but not to retire for long. The world needs Hercule Poirot, Japp said gruffly, clapping his shoulder. Alone again, Poirot sat by the fire, a fresh cup of hot chocolate in hand. He opened a small journal, its pages filled with notes from past cases. Flipping to a blank page, he began to write, not of Marianne Duval, but of his plans for the countryside. A small cottage, perhaps, with a garden, where he could cultivate roses, a place to think, to reflect, to find balance. The fire crackled, and Poirot's pen paused. He looked out at the skyline, its lights like stars in a man-made constellation. The city would always call him back. He knew its mysteries, its chaos, its need for order. But for now, he would seek peace. The duel was over, the villain defeated, and no threads remained dangling. The game was won, and Hercule Poirot, master of logic, allowed himself a moment of quiet triumph. He closed the journal, sipped his chocolate, and smiled. The curtain had fallen, but the stage of life awaited. His next act,